tell, do you see the road? I'm not to my soul into me the size. Whenever the smoke clear out of my face and my picture perfect, you do it. All of that green together, the truth, yeah. Gonna tell you the
Hello and welcome back to Cypherfics, guys. We are happy to have you back with us today in part 8 of What If Harry Potter Meets the Power Rangers. Make sure to like, share, subscribe and also press the bell icon so that you never miss a great update. Also make sure to check out the wonderful author 10star12 on fanfiction.net. Well, let's continue with the story now.
The pillar of light touched down on the roof of a skyscraper in Angel Grove and quickly faded out to reveal Harry in his Magi Ranger uniform. Standing before him in profile, unmoving as stone, was the serpentine form of the Loker-empowered Mutatus. Loker's head was still present in the darkened sky, glaring hatefully down at Angel Grove. Harry sighed as he looked over the view before him. Just as he had seen in the viewing globe earlier, Mutatus stood in place, gazing ahead blankly. From where he was standing, Harry could barely make out the top half of the Megazord around the intervening buildings and through the darkness. The thick foam/glue substance Mutatus had sprayed them with was still caked on as the machine lay there, as lifeless as Mutatus appeared. This was still rather curious to Harry despite Golder's tiny slip, but not really something helpful to him at the moment. I still don't know what Zordon was talking about, but I guess the best way to figure things out with the power is to fly by the seat of my pants and rely on instinct. Luckily, my Gryffindor's charge-ahead mentality is perfect for that, Harry sighed before readying himself mentally. You ready, Hedwig? As always, Harry/Wizard. With a smile for his familiar back at the command center, Harry began gathering up his power in preparation for battle. Almost immediately, Loker's eyes twitched in his direction before the floating head turned to face him. So, the head drawled. It seems the little wizard has returned to try and face off against the power of Loker once again. Harry didn't bother to respond, doing his best to keep Zordon's words in mind. Loker was bound tightly by the spell Rita used to summon him, and there was very little that he would be able to do in a fight, seeing as Rita apparently wanted to keep Angel Grove intact. No, this battle would be between Harry and Hedwig and the serpent-headed Mutatus that was now turning to face them in response to Loker's taunt. Feeling his power reach a peak, Harry nodded firmly to himself before passing his staff to his left hand and throwing his right into the air. I call upon the power of the Silver Owl Zord. Hedwig. In a bright flash of light and accompanied by a loud screech, Hedwig appeared in the skies over Angel Grove in her Zord form, already in a full-speed dive with her talons extended toward Mutatus. Given little time to react, Mutatus was completely unable to avoid the sudden attack, and so fell to the ground after Hedwig's talons raked across its face and down its long neck. With an inarticulate growl, Mutatus climbed back to its feet before bringing its hands together over the Loker face on its chest. Moments later, it threw its hands forward, the eyes on the Loker face flashing with a few pulses of light before twin arcs of multicolored lightning shot out toward Hedwig. The Zord was moving too fast though. As she beat her wings and fired up her turbines to ascend again, she easily rose over the dangerous bolts before making a long turn and attempting another stoop. Mutatus fired off the lightning attack once more, barely missing Hedwig when she slip-rolled to the side, bleeding off a bit of speed and altering the angle of her attack enough to catch the monster off guard once again and grab a hold of its right arm. Beating her wings furiously and screeching all the while, Hedwig pulled Mutatus with her into the air, firing up her rockets to help retain her speed before flaring her wings and releasing the monster, effectively flinging it beyond the city limits and into the mountainous region to the north. Smiling, Harry nodded firmly. Good going, Hedwig, you got him out of the city. Now let's see if we can keep things going. Keep dogging Mutatus like that and I'll see if I can't find an opening to hit him with some of my more damaging spells. It shall be done, Harry/Wizard. Feeling much more confident now, Harry twisted in place, apparating to another rooftop before repeating the process until he could line of sight to a short peak near where Hedwig was once more circling Mutatus. By this point, the monster was furious. Alternating between its lightning attack and the adhesive foam in its furious attempts to down the circling owl Zord. Hedwig continued to stay one step ahead, however, often adjusting her course just enough to avoid the monster's attack only to lash out with her talons as she passed. Harry hummed to himself in thought as he watched. It seems as if the guy is powerful, but really stupid. He can't plan far enough ahead to counter Hedwig's attacks. We need to try and use that to our advantage since Hedwig's attacks don't really seem to be doing much damage. Don't think this fight is over just yet, Maggling. Rita's voice echoed across the area with a crack of thunder. You seem to have forgotten about Loker. Harry snorted. I already know that Loker is bound by your spell and unable to do more than he already has, Rita. I don't have anything to worry about from him. Rita's cackling laughter sounded out before she spoke again. And who said that I only bound Loker to one action in my spell? Harry's eyes widened beneath his visor as he saw his familiar begin another stoop. Hedwig, be careful. Before the owl could respond, Loker's frightening visage appeared suddenly right in front of her. The unexpected appearance startled the sentient Zord, making her flare her wings and bank hard to the left, which left her open for Mutatis's lightning attack to catch her solidly in her right wing. Harry's shout of concern echoed the Zord's screech of pain and dismay as she crashed to the ground, kicking up a huge cloud of dust as she slid to a stop. Hedwig! Harry shouted, twisting in place to apparate closer and summoning up a burst of wind to help clear the settling dust and debris. When he finally caught sight of his familiar Zord again, he nearly sobbed at the sight of her mangled right wing. Aside from being slightly out of shape, the turbine blades were completely missing from the wing and the feather markings were badly scorched around it. Slowly, Hedwig struggled to a vertical base, her injured wing held out slightly as she hopped up in an attempt to regain altitude, only to drop back to the ground again, her one working turbine not enough to achieve lift. I do not think I can fly anymore, Harry/Wizard. Given enough time, the power will fix my wing, but for now I am helpless. Harry could almost feel the anger in Hedwig's mental voice as she glared at the somehow smug-looking face of Mutatis and the clearly smug face of Loker. If he were to guess, Rita most likely gave Loker freedom to move around near a battle as he saw fit. Loker had used this freedom to startle Hedwig enough to give Mutatis the time to hit her with his attack. Harry growled to himself, turning to face the giant form of Mutatis from his spot near Hedwig's talons. What do we do now? You must remember what I told you, Harry. Zordon's voice echoed from the communicator. If you and Hedwig are to combine your power, you will become stronger than ever before. You must believe in yourself, believe in Hedwig, and trust in the power to protect and guide you. If you do so, you will surely be victorious. Harry sighed before turning to glance up at Hedwig. I am ready, Harry/Wizard. We must work together to defeat this dead snake thing and the mean floating head. Harry nodded firmly, pulling himself together as best he could before drawing up the power within him and letting himself go. It's about time, young Harry. The voice of the morphing grid spoke into this mind, chastising him lightly. This monster, empowered by one who has perverted my power, cannot be allowed to remain. Prepare to receive the next use of the power and the true strength of your old companion's new form. Feeling the grid take hold, Harry relaxed himself as best he could as his body performed a super jump, rising into the air quickly before back-flipping and landing smoothly on top of Hedwig's head. Glancing down briefly, Harry saw the glimmer of light that was the resurrection stone at the peak of the dome on her head before he once more felt power flaring up within him. Spinning his staff around him, Harry glared at the still cocky-looking duo. You think this is over already? Well, you're dead wrong. Gathering his power into his staff, Harry stopped spinning it suddenly, holding the weapon vertically before him in two hands before bringing it down into the dome at his feet with a solid clang. Immediately, purple light flared up from the point of impact and Harry almost completely lost his feeling of self. It was as if he and Hedwig had truly become one being, a very literal translation of what Zordon had earlier advised them. Opening his their eye, which had closed when Harry released his power, Harry first noticed that they could still see clearly out of the solid plate on the right side of his their face as if it was a normal, functioning eye. It was a relatively minor thing, but it was still the first thing to jump to his mind as Hedwig's own comfort in the form settled into him and prevented him from overreacting to the unfamiliar body he now found himself sharing. Are you ready, Harry/Wizard? With the two of us standing as one, I find I can make use of a power that would be most helpful in this battle. Harry nodded, feeling the owl body shift slightly as he did so. All right, Hedwig, he said, noting that his voice was echoing out around the area at the same time. Let's get this done. And what good will fusing with your crippled Zord do you, Magling? Rita's echoing voice demanded. With that wing damaged, all you've done is make it easier for Mutatis to finish you off at the same time. Even while Rita was mocking them, Harry could feel a steady buildup of power from within him /them. Suddenly, his their wings flared out, the damaged right one slightly slower, and they hopped into the air before floating there as a purple flash of light shone from the resurrection stone atop his their head. Then, Harry felt his their form transforming. It started with the wing joints. They rotated horizontally at the shoulder until they were sitting parallel to the ground before folding backwards behind his their head and neck and then down along his their back. The feather tips meshed smoothly, even though some on the right wing were a bit bent out of place from Mutatis's attack, forming an almost cape-like structure. Then, his their chest split open down the middle, the now loose halves folding around a full 270 degrees to come to rest over the rockets that had folded up to his their sides. On what used to be the inside of his their chest, a pair of humanoid arms rested folded up, one on each side, until the panels locked into place over the rocket boosters and the arms relaxed, straightening out in a more natural position. Below him his their legs seemed to unfold as well, extending out from within his their torso as the individual talons locked together and folded up slightly to create more landworthy feet. Then, the owl head lifted up slightly before tilting forward, coming to a rest with the front of the face pointing downward and the dome atop his their owl head with the resurrection stone pointing straight forward. The avian head shifted back into the torso a bit before seeming to click into place as the rest of the torso compacted and shifted around it, quickly forming a more defined humanoid form as opposed to the rounder one of an owl with the purple orb from atop the owl's head resting in the center of the chest. Finally, from where the owl head formerly sat, a humanoid head rose up. It had a few avian features in that there were feather-like markings around the bottom of the head, almost seeming to flow up to the top where they created a sort of crest, but the actual face of the head was flat and smooth, a dark purple metal framing a sort of grilled faceplate and the dichromatic eyes, one the yellow of Hedwig, and the other Harry's own emerald green. Silver Owl Zord, Warrior Mode. Harry/Hedwig shouted out as they moved their humanoid body together for the first time. Guided as they were by the power, they moved smoothly into a fighting stance, their fingers hooked slightly to reveal the pointed talon-like tips on them. Almost immediately, Harry felt a rush of information flood their minds. Spells they could use, fighting techniques, attack patterns and tactics that suited their new form. They now knew what this new form was capable of, what weapons they now had at their disposal, and at least half an idea of how to take the monster before them down. Rita spoke once again, her echoing voice starting to sound the slightest bit nervous. So you seem to have your own Megazord now. I suppose that this new form will be a more appropriate challenge for one of my best warriors. Mutatus. Destroy them now. With another inarticulate roar, the serpentine monster charged forward, one hand drawn back to punch at him/them. Harry/Hedwig merely shifted to one side, letting the fist pass right by their face before ducking down slightly and delivering a swift backhand to Mutatus's side and slipping around behind it to rake their claws down its back. It became very apparent with just that one exchange that this new form, while definitely more slender and a fair bit shorter than Mutatus's current form, indeed shorter than both the Megazord and the Dragonzord as well, it was also much, much faster. Turning swiftly, as if the previous strikes had no effect on it, Mutatus swung wildly at Harry/Hedwig, attempting to use its immense strength to its advantage, but the fused duo merely danced around each blow, occasionally striking back with a swift jab or strike from their clawed hands that was summarily ignored by the monster. And so the battle continued. Finally, after several minutes of ducking, dodging, and striking to no avail, Mutatus backed away and began charging its lightning attack again. Harry/Hedwig watched carefully as the eyes of the mini-loker on Mutatus's chest glowed brightly before the lightning bolts lanced out. Mere moments before the attack would have hit, Harry/Hedwig moved their arms forward with a triumphant shout. Protego! The lightning bolts flared harshly as they struck the translucent purple barrier that formed before Harry/Hedwig. Growling, Mutatus seemed to redouble its efforts, the bolts of lightning growing thicker while Harry/Hedwig began sliding backwards along the ground from the sheer kinetic force produced by the attack meeting their shield. Harry, Zordon's voice echoed throughout their mind. You and Hedwig, powerful though you may feel in your current form, cannot hope to stand against the empowered Mutatus directly. Your only hope is to destroy the source of its enhanced power. According to our sensors, the mark of Loker on Mutatus's chest is the focal point. If you are able to sufficiently damage it, Mutatus will lose all of its strength and become vulnerable to conventional attacks once again. Nodding, and noting that their mechanical head nodded when he did, Harry responded mentally. Thanks for the heads up, Zordon. We'll see what we can do. Hoping that Zordon received their message, and also thankful that they didn't actually say that out loud. This double identity thing was getting difficult to manage. Harry/Hedwig once more slipped slightly to the side, shifting the facing of their shield and deflecting the overpowered lightning attack away and behind him/them, causing an explosion and kicking up debris. Sagging slightly as the magical drain from the shield hit him/them briefly, Harry/Hedwig used the cover of the dust cloud formed by the deflected attack to dart forward, erupting from the cloud with their right hand cloaked in purple energy as they move it forward into the mini-loker on Mutatus's chest. For an instant, everything froze. The wind blew past the two titans locked in place, the smaller, metallic one with a glowing purple hand move into the small effigy on the chest of the taller more serpentine one. And then, again all at once, Mutidus and Harry/Hedwig both were thrown back by a massive explosion emanating from the damaged mark of Loker. Shaking his/their head groggily, and how strange was it for him/them to feel groggy with one now a mechanical owl and the other not expecting such a thing in this new mechanical form. Harry/Hedwig climbed back to their feet. Looking over the battlefield, they immediately noticed that Mutidus was having a much harder time standing again, and after a few more moments, it became apparent why. Each time the monster tried to stand, its arms or legs would give out from under it. It seemed that the sudden lack of Loker's power had its own brand of side effect on Mutidus, quite similar to Harry's own reaction upon releasing Zordon's power earlier. Once the dust cleared enough to make out more detail, Harry/Hedwig noted that on top of its apparent weakness, Mutidus had also reverted to its former, zombie-like appearance. Smirking to him/theirself as Mutidus finally managed to regain its feet, if incredibly unsteadily, Harry/Hedwig took a fighting stance, once more holding his/their clawed hands at the ready. "You're going down now, dead thing." While the weakened Mutidus stood there helplessly, Harry/Hedwig's wings unclasped from each other before spreading wide behind them while they hunched over slightly. Then, they suddenly shot forward in the blink of an eye and with a burst of power and a crescent moon glowing in the air behind them. Reaching the monster in a fraction of a second, Harry/Hedwig lashed out with their once again glowing claws, leaving behind dark scorch marks and sparks flying everywhere. Sliding to a stop behind Mutidus in a crouch, Harry/Hedwig smirked internally as the monster swayed back and forth before finally falling to the ground. Silver Owl, Moonlit Claw /. With a massive explosion, Mutidus was destroyed and they rose from their crouch to face Loker, still floating in the sky. The massive head growled at them. "You are lucky I am limited in my abilities, little wizard, but rest assured, we will meet again, and you will fall." Without another word, Loker began to glow before changing into an orb of light and shooting off into the sky. With Loker's departure, the sky lightened to the bright blue it had been, though with the sun a few hours farther along in its daily journey. Just as Harry/Hedwig started to relax, they felt the ground start shaking beneath them and spun back to face Angel Grove proper, only to see the welcome, if a bit late, forms of the Megazord and Dragonzord stomping their way as fast as they could go. Smiling to him/theirself, Harry/Hedwig waved to the approaching Zords. "Hey there, guys. You're a bit late to the party, aren't you? And after Loker left, you guys came running up and that was that?" Harry finished telling the other Rangers the story of his first solo battle with a smile on his face. Mostly, he was just relieved that everything had worked out well. Marie had been saved, Alpha wasn't too terribly damaged and boy had the robot worried about that when they were making their plans. Mutidus was destroyed, Loker had left, and with the other Rangers free from the Island of Illusion, Rita's plan had been foiled once again. All in all, a good day to be a Power Ranger. "So you and Hedwig fused and were able to achieve your own fighting form? More phenomenal." Billy seemed incredibly fascinated by the details behind Harry and Hedwig's battle. Throughout the conversation/debriefing, the Blue Ranger had questioned and queried about the smallest of details from the different sensations to the strange sense of detachment Harry had felt the entire time. "It is indeed an achievement to be proud of, Harry. And you as well, Hedwig." Zordon spoke with pride in his voice. "You have stepped up when Rita's evil prevented the others from fighting by your side and served admirably to defend Angel Grove and the world as a whole from her forces. But that is no reason to become lax in your studies and practice. In time, the two of you will become more accustomed to your new battle mode, allowing you to use more of Harry's spells along with weapons provided by Hedwig's mechanical nature. With enough practice, the sync between you will become so complete that you will no longer even feel like two separate beings in one body, allowing your movements to become more fluid and swift without the aid of the morphing grid, making you even more effective in your battles." Harry smiled at the floating head of his mentor. "That's good to hear, Zordon, and thank you for the compliment." "Yes, thank you Big Head for the kind words about my Harry/Wizard and I," Hedwig said with a quick bob of her head toward Zordon. Harry chuckled even as he rolled his eyes at Hedwig's possessiveness. "Hedwig says thank you too." The next evening, Harry and the other Rangers were once again at the youth center, watching and cheering as Zack obliterated the competition in the dance contest he had previously been so worried about. It wasn't until after the contest ended and Zack was declared the clear winner while Bulk sulked angrily in the corner, having been eliminated almost as soon as he began dancing, that the Rangers gathered at a table to drink some smoothies and relax for a bit. "You see Zack," Trini started almost immediately after everyone sat down. "We told you that all you had to do was believe in yourself and you would do great." "Yeah, thanks guys," Zack responded, his customary wide smile back on his face as he met the eyes of his fellow Rangers around the table. "I guess I don't know what came over me. I just got all kinds of worked up over the contest that I lost sight of myself. Harry laughed from his seat between Zach and Trini as he clapped a hand onto Zach's shoulder. Yeah, well, don't let it happen again, alright? Zach joined in Harry's laughter while the others chuckled along with them. You know, Tommy started quietly once the laughter had died down, I'm just really glad that Harry was able to hold down the fort while we were gone. Kimberly snorted briefly, her face going bright red when she realized what she had done, but she soldiered on anyway. Hold down the fort nothing, Harry saved the day on his own. That battle mode of Hedwig's is really cool. Jason nodded slowly. Yeah, I just want to let you know, Harry, that it's good to know that you'll be able to cover our backs in a situation like that. You saved the city, and all of our families too. Thanks. Man. Harry nodded, taking the implied olive branch. You are very welcome, Jason. All of you are welcome. I'm just glad that Hedwig and I were able to stop them before things started to get bad. And I'm really glad we were able to save Marie from Golder. Sitting next to him, Trini perked up slightly before giggling and pointing past Harry. Speaking of Marie. Turning to see what Trini was pointing at, Harry caught sight of the television Ernie kept on the counter at the snack bar. It was currently tuned to the local news and there was a very familiar girl on the screen. The reporter on screen, an older-looking brunette, was standing next to the slightly nervous-looking child and speaking into a microphone. And we're here now with Marie Higgins, a young girl who was saved earlier today by the mysterious Purple Ranger that has been sighted alongside the other 6 Power Rangers these last few months. Marie, what can you tell us about this mysterious ranger? When the reporter held the microphone near Marie's mouth, it was easy to see that she was nearly scared stiff with nerves. All the same, Marie started speaking, recounting her day and her 2 separate encounters with the Magi Ranger. Well, earlier I got lost and couldn't find my mommy. And then the big monster guy almost stepped on me, but the Purple Ranger saved me. He fixed my leg with magic and said he was the Magi Ranger. He said that he's a friend of the other Power Rangers and he beat up the gold monkey guy with the Green Ranger. Then he sent me to the youth center with his magic, but when I left to try and find my mommy again the monkey guy caught me. But Magi Ranger came and saved me again. He made it look like there were 2 of him and he tricked the monkey butt. At this point, Marie broke down into giggles and the smiling reporter brought the microphone back to her mouth. And you heard it here, folks. The new ally of the Power Rangers calls himself the Magi Ranger, and if his rescue of little Marie here and his later saving of the city are anything to go by, then I for one feel assured that we can sleep well knowing that he fights with our other heroes to protect us from the evil of Rita Repulsa. Turning back to the smiling faces of the other Rangers, Harry couldn't help the blush that lit up his face. Even Jason was smirking with teasing good humor at the embarrassment Harry was feeling after Marie's interview. Finally, after several long seconds, Trini grabbed her glass and lifted it up. To the Magi Ranger. It's thanks to him that we still have a city today. May he continue to protect Angel Grove and everyone in it. The fact that she said this loud enough for everyone nearby to hear it only increased Harry's embarrassment, but he was able to get his blush back under control to avoid rousing suspicion with everyone else in the room. Stuttering slightly, Harry raised his glass and repeated the toast along with the other Rangers and the half of the youth center who had heard Trini. Once everyone had drank and Zach had gotten some ribbing in, Harry felt himself relax. He was finally feeling good about things for what was really the first time since he arrived in this dimension. There were going to be more battles in the future, of that he had no doubt, but he was now confident enough in his own abilities and in his place with the other Rangers that he no longer feared the outcome. Let Rita send down her monsters. Let her come down to wreak havoc herself. Harry and the other Power Rangers would be here waiting for her, and they would beat her back every time. Aya. See-aya. Tommy jumped into the air, spinning as he did so and launching a tornado kick at Harry, which the wizard swiftly ducked under. Before Harry was able to return upright, Tommy had landed and recovered his stance, forcing Harry to deflect and dodge a few rapid-fire punches. In an attempt to shift the momentum, Harry deflected Tommy's next punch to the side with his left hand, spinning to the right as he did so and launching an elbow strike toward Tommy's side. The experienced fighter predicted the move, however, and was able to shift his arm down to block most of the blow before shifting his body weight and shoving Harry off balance. Taking advantage of this, Tommy went low, sweeping Harry's legs out from under him with one of his own, sending the Magi Ranger to the grass with a grunt and leaving him staring up at the sun shining in the clear sky over Angel Grove Park. All right, Harry panted, laying spread eagle on the ground where he had fallen. I give. Tommy chuckled as he relaxed from his fighting stance. Hey, you're doing a whole lot better now, Harry. And there's no shame in tapping out when you're trying your best. The Green Ranger stepped closer, offering a hand to help Harry up, which was accepted after a moment to catch his breath. Once he had regained his feet, Harry brushed himself off before responding. Yeah, but I still don't come anywhere close to matching up to your skills. You are seriously good at this, Tommy. Tommy chuckled while awkwardly scratching the back of his head. Well, that's what happens when you've been practicing martial arts your whole life, I guess. Sensing Tommy's unease, Harry just nodded before gesturing toward their bags where they sat under a tree to one side. I'm going to take a breather for a bit. You want me to grab your water for you? Tommy shook his head. No, I'm still good to go for a bit longer. I'll join you in a minute though. Nodding once again, Harry turned and walked the short distance to their bags. Reaching into his purple gym bag, Harry pulled out an equally purple water bottle and took a drink before sitting down on the grass. The bag and water bottle had been gifts from Tommy when the two had met for their first training session together, and while Harry may have cringed at the color and especially at Tommy's knowing and rather teasing smirk when Harry first saw them, Harry accepted them in the spirit with which they were given. It was the day after the battle with Mutatus that Tommy approached Harry about taking over his martial arts education. The Ranger had been teaching a few students on the side, mostly younger kids who weren't able to get into Jason's classes for one reason or another, but he was more than happy to offer to help his fellow Ranger out when he left Jason's class. For his part, Harry had had no idea what he was going to do about learning karate and so eagerly accepted Tommy's offer. Though there were some rough spots at first, Harry's begrudging acceptance of the purple-colored GG gifts one of them, they had found they worked quite well together. Once Tommy was able to accurately judge where Harry was in his martial arts ability and how quickly he was able to pick things up with the grid's help, the experienced martial artist was able to create an accelerated program for Harry that made his martial arts abilities increase noticeably almost immediately. While he wouldn't be able to earn any karate belts with Tommy as his teacher and their accelerated class, Harry wasn't really worried about that aspect of it, and so the arrangement was as near perfect as could be for him. Not having spent much one-on-one time with the Green Ranger since he had joined the team, Harry was quite happy to learn that Tommy was very easy to get along with. Having a rather laid-back and friendly attitude made Tommy a very likable guy, though all that got put on the back burner when he got into a fight, be it a spar or a battle against evil. Tommy took his karate very seriously. Even now, while Harry sat reminiscing in the shade, Tommy was going through a series of high-speed katas that made it look like he was fighting a group of invisible enemies and probably kicking their collective, but the dedication of the Green Ranger to his art form really showed why he made such a powerful opponent while he was under Rita's control, and an equally powerful ally now. Harry groaned as he replaced his water bottle into his bag and shifted to lie on his back. He hadn't been sleeping too well lately. That added on to the intense training session he had gone through had managed to make him more than a bit sore. Though the now daily exercise was far from the only contributing factor to his sleeping problems. First off, it seemed that his body was finally starting to protest his months of sleeping on nothing but a cot in his room in the command center, and cushioning charms could only go so far to help the situation. He knew that an ideal solution would be to actually find a more permanent place to live, preferably one with a real bed, or at least room for one. The room in the command center, while quite enough for him initially, really wasn't suitable as a long-term living area. Not to mention that Harry couldn't actually remember the last time he had taken a shower somewhere other than the locker rooms at the youth center. All this extra training with Tommy in the last week, while incredibly helpful and definitely essential, brought on an additional level of exhaustion that made his current sleeping arrangements much less acceptable. He would go to bed exhausted from his now daily training with Tommy, only to toss and turn throughout the night, unable to fully relax on the cot, and wake in the morning not feeling much more rested than he had been before sleeping. This all brought him back to his need for his own place to stay, which then brought up the biggest obstacle to that goal, his lack of funds. While working at the youth center certainly made him enough to keep him fed with a bit left over, he wasn't making anywhere near enough money to be able to afford his own place to live while that was his only source of income. While he had disenchanted several of the galleons by this point, he still had no clue as to how he could go about selling them. All he knew was that he had to be careful not to sell them all at once, as too much new gold hitting the market at the same time, and especially from the same place or seller, would raise far too many questions. And Ernie, as awesome as the man was beginning to ask a few rather pointed questions as well. When he had gotten the job at the youth center, Harry had neglected to give Ernie a home address. Zordon and Alpha had helped him arrange a P.O. box for any necessary mail, but Ernie was now getting suspicious about Harry's lack of a clear answer on the subject of where he was living. Ernie certainly meant well. Harry seriously doubted there was an unkind bone in the man's body, but it was getting to the point where Harry was running out of ways to deflect Ernie's questions. He really didn't want to have to memory charm the man as he had been so kind to him thus far, but it was starting to look like that was the only way Harry would be able to get him to ease off with his well-intended interrogations. On top of this added stress and his new training with Tommy, Zordon had started Harry on yet another new topic in his training with the power. Harry was now learning how to draw in and hold on to power throughout the day. As opposed to when he collected power and used it immediately, this technique called for Harry to store the power in a sort of internal pocket, or at least that's how Zordon described it. Harry just likened it to his own magical core. The purpose of this exercise was to enable Harry to cast grid-powered spells without always having to draw the power up first. By keeping a charge available at all times, he could react faster, which was quite the necessary skill when one was fighting against the likes of Rita's monsters. For now though, Harry couldn't really keep too much power with him, barely enough for a weak force wave. The feeling was similar to having eaten too much, a kind of internal pressure that he had to adapt to before he could increase the levels again, but Zordon had assured him that those who practiced this particular aspect of using the power diligently were known to be able to fight for hours at a time without having to draw on more power in the heat of battle. And anything that meant Harry didn't have to do as much showboating as the grid demanded for the use of its power was good in his book. But this new topic did add yet another level of mental stress and strain onto Harry's already full load, which certainly didn't help with his sleeping situation. He really needed to get his own place, like really needed to. But he didn't have enough money to afford one just yet. Harry was snapped out of his circuitous thinking when Tommy flopped down next to him with a sigh of satisfaction. Taking a drink from his own green water bottle, Tommy shot him a smile. "I meant what I said before, Harry. You really are doing very well." Harry raised an eyebrow before speaking with humor in his voice. "Tommy, you know that I'm not one of the kids you've been teaching lately that needs constant reassurance, right? While I appreciate the thought, I'm not going to quit on you if I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere." Harry chuckled slightly when Tommy blushed in embarrassment before he continued. "Besides, I know I'm doing better than before. The faster pace we have going here works better for me since I not only want to learn this, but I kind of have to learn it as fast as I can. The speed the grid lets me pick things up at isn't something Jason could take advantage of without leaving the rest of the class behind. I really appreciate your helping me with this." Tommy waved a hand airily. "It's not a problem, Harry. I'm just happy to help out. It's the least I can do, really." Tommy trailed off before taking another drink of water. The Green Ranger still had a rather large issue with what he had done while under Rita's control, but by now Harry knew better than to argue about it with him. So Harry just nodded and did his best to relax, focusing enough to circulate his magic and the power through his body to help aid his control and slightly alleviate physical exhaustion, another exercise recommended by Zordon for his downtime, but otherwise letting his mind drift again. Only for the familiar six-tone chime of their communicators to snap him out of it all at once. Exchanging a brief glance with Tommy, Harry lifted his communicator and activated it. "Go ahead, Zordon." "Harry," Zordon said, his tone grave. "The other Rangers need the help of Tommy and yourself. They are in downtown Angel Grove battling a monster known as the Pexter. It is an avian monster similar to a woodpecker that has been using its powerful beak to deal a great amount of damage to the surrounding buildings. Despite their best efforts, the monster is too strong for the Rangers to handle themselves." Harry and Tommy exchanged another quick glance before both nodded firmly. "Got it, Zordon, we're on our way. Good luck, and may the power protect you both." Harry pulled his coin from his pocket and shifted it once more to wand form while Tommy fished his own morpher out of the depths of his green gym bag. Once he had retrieved it, Harry waved his wand, closing up both bags and hiding them under a temporary illusion before once more meeting Tommy's eyes. "It's morphin' time," Tommy said with a firm nod before looking up and squaring his stance, staring firmly into the distance. Harry just shook his head slightly, chuckling a bit at the dramatics before whipping his wand through the air, drawing the symbol of the Deathly Hallows in a trail of fire. "Dragonzord! Magi Ranger, power up!" Harry and Tommy appeared in twin beams of light in their signature colors atop one of the taller buildings in Angel Grove. When they materialized fully, both began looking around for a giant monster that was destroying buildings. What they got was a few random columns of smoke in the area, the distant noise of sirens, and a much closer explosion. It was the explosion that really caught their attention as it was accompanied by a shuddering in the building they were standing on. Rushing to the edge and glancing over, Harry and Tommy could barely make out the tiny, multicolored dots of their allies accompanied by the various flashes of light that accompanied their battle with a sixth, fully unidentifiable dot that they assumed to be the Pexter. The dots were moving around in a kind of courtyard in front of the building they were standing on. "You know," Harry mused aloud. "When Zordon said the monster was destroying buildings, I kind of expected it to be giant already." Tommy nodded as they watched the battle far below. "I know what you mean, but it doesn't matter in the end. That thing is a threat to Angel Grove and we need to get down there and help out no matter what size it is. Harry nodded slightly, but before he could say anything else, Tommy leapt off the building with a fierce "See-ya." Harry just sighed. Yeah, I'm not doing that. Twisting in place and flexing his magic, Harry apparat to the bottom of the building, on the far side of the courtyard from where the battle was happening. The loud crack of his arrival echoed across the area and caught the attention of the Rangers and the misshapen bird monster they were fighting. Ah? The creature shouted, its voice coming through surprisingly clear despite the fact that it was speaking with a jagged-looking beak that extended more than a foot from its face. You must be the Magi Ranger that Empress Rita told me about. I was wondering when you'd be showing up. The Pexter was indeed an avian monster, as Zordon has said. Its body and arms were mostly yellow with a few blue portions here and there, and its fingers were tipped in inch-long, curved talons. Aside from the overly large beak, there were several ragged blue feathers coming from atop his head and around two large yellow circles on either side of its head that may have been eyes. Coming from behind its shoulders were two tattered-looking, dark blue wings that didn't seem as if they had enough feathers to enable flight, though that didn't mean much with Rita's magic in play. The monster was so focused on Harry that it completely missed the falling form of Tommy until he let out another loud "Aya," as he dropped onto the monster's head, the dragon dagger lashing out as he went and knocking the monster to the ground in a heap below him. Hey there, bird brain, Tommy said as he leapt off the downed monster and regrouped with the 5 core Rangers. Thanks for breaking my fall. Harry just shook his head as he jogged over to the group, keeping a wary eye on the shifting heap of monster before them. You little pest, the Pexterneer screeched as it climbed back to its feet. Other than a tiny scorch mark on the top of its beak where Tommy's dragon dagger had hit it, the monster seemed undamaged from Tommy's attack. That hurt a little bit. I'm gonna make you pay for that. DMN it. Jason growled, clenching his fist as he moved up a half step. What is it gonna take to take this guy down? Nothing we try works. Keep your eye on the birdie, the monster shouted, cackling as it charged toward the 7 Rangers, flapping its arms like a pair of wings, which Harry found odd since the creature actually did have wings. Before any of the Rangers could react, the monster was among them and lashing out with its clawed hands and beak in turn. While the claws knocked the Rangers aside as if they weren't there, it was the beak that Harry quickly learned was the more dangerous weapon. Tommy found it out firsthand as the sharp tip of the monster's beak impacted squarely with the center of his golden shield and sent him flying backwards to crash into a building across the street. Ah, the monster crooned while the Rangers regrouped nearby, save Tommy, who was still struggling to his feet from where he had been knocked back. Where did you go, Green Ranger? I wasn't done with you yet. The Pexter leapt into the air, its ragged wings unfolding and beating hard, changing its jump into flight and sending it hurtling through the air toward Tommy. Tommy! Kimberly shouted, running toward him. Heads up! Huh? Tommy glanced up from his crouched position, one hand clutching at the scorched center of his chest shield only to catch sight of the Pexter swooping toward him, beak first. Whoa! At the last moment, Tommy dodged to the side, rolling away before springing unsteadily to his feet just as the monster's beak struck the side of the building. The point of impact exploded. Harry and the other Rangers found themselves knocked off their feet as the shockwave from the Pexter's attack washed over them. Merlin's ball. Harry groaned as he clambered back to his feet. What the heck was that? It happens every time the Pexter hits a building with its beak. Zack answered. We have no idea why, but it's definitely not something we want to mess with. Yeah, I can imagine, Harry mumbled as he and the others ran to Tommy's new position. The Green Ranger had been caught in the back by the shockwave and, as he was much closer, was once more sent flying. He had hit the ground hard and went rolling for several more yards before coming to a stop in the middle of the street. Oh man, Tommy groaned as Kimberly and Jason helped him to his feet. This really isn't my day, guys. Ah, you moved. Pexter taunted as it stepped out of the dust cloud caused by the explosion. No matter, that just means I can have some more fun with you before I finish you off. Leaping into the air once more, the monster's wings spread out and began beating, turning it into an organic missile once more. All right, Harry said, his face set in a scowl under his helmet as he summoned the Magi staff and stepped forward. Let's see how you handle this. Impedimenta. He expended his pool of grid power to cast the spell, giving it more force than normal, and it was probably good he had because of the speed the Pexter was traveling at. As it was, the monster slowed to a stop a mere 5 feet from where Harry stood at the front of the group of Rangers. What? The monster began screaming, flailing its arms and legs as it was held in the spell's grasp. What's going on? What did you do to me? Nodding to himself, Harry spun his staff once before slashing it downward sharply. And now let's clip those wings of yours. Defindo. The severing charm lashed out, impacting the monster and slicing off the top half of its right wing just before the impediment jinx faded, dropping the pexter to the pavement on its face. Amusingly enough, the monster's beak split the ground when it hit, driving it into the paved surface and leaving a hole behind when the bird monster pushed itself up as the rangers backed away to get a bit of distance. "No! You puny human! I'll destroy you for that!" "Nice job, Harry!" Jason half shouted. "Now let's see how this guy fights on our terms." "Right," the other 4 core rangers chanted as they all drew their blade blasters and charged the land-bound monster. Harry stood back with the still recovering Tommy and watched the ensuing melee. He knew that even with his recent improvement, he would still be more of a handicap in the battle. Even still, he began spinning his staff, storing what power he could and channeling the rest into his weapon, waiting for the right moment to give the other rangers the advantage. The opportunity came when the pexter, still dominating the close-range battles despite its injury, knocked Jason away once again, making it the only participant in that battle that was still standing. Feeling a bit of grid-influenced levity come over him, Harry moved his staff forward with a grunt, releasing the energy within in the form of a levin bolt. "Don't forget about me, Seed Breath." As the grid-powered lightning bolt raked across the bird monster and knocked it to the ground even as it continued to deal damage, Harry couldn't help but muse. Seed Breath? Seriously? The grid takes over for an instant to make him taunt the monster for its own satisfaction and the best it can come up with is Seed Breath? Harry rolled his eyes and gave an internal sigh of exasperation as he felt his collected power drain away, freeing the monster from his attack. As the other rangers formed up around Harry, the pexter climbed to its feet again. The monster was now looking rather worse for wear. While it continued to laugh as if everything it saw was incredibly hilarious, its entire body was crisscrossed with scorch mark trails from Harry's attack. Add that in with the severed wing and things were certainly looking up for the rangers in this battle. "Don't you think I'm done just yet, rangers?" the pexter taunted, shaking a single finger at them on one of its hands. "This battle is far from over." The pexter flung its arms out to the sides, both of its wings stretching out again as it did so, including its formerly severed right wing. "What the?" Zack gasped while the other rangers made similar noises of disbelief. "The monster must have an advanced form of regeneration," Billy deduced mere moments later. "Now, how about a taste of my toxic tornado?" the pexter squawked before it began flapping its wings fiercely, kicking up a strong wind that soon had all 7 rangers leaning forward and straining to avoid losing ground. Harry himself had planted the butt of his staff into the pavement with a burst of grid-enhanced strength and was clinging to it with his left hand while his right kept a firm grip on the still-winded Tommies. The 2 rangers weathered the windstorm only slightly better than the others who were all pushed back several feet. But that only meant that they were the first to get hit when the pexter opened its beak wide, revealing multiple spines nestled in the back of its throat that then shot forward like rockets. Harry felt the first spine hit him in his left shoulder, the sudden shock of the impact and bright flash of sparks making him instinctively release his grip on the Magi staff and sending both he and Tommy flipping end over end while the spines continued peppering them. The other rangers went through similar reactions, all of them losing their footing when the spines hit them and getting caught up in the wind as the attacks continued. The rangers' flights were short, however, as they all slammed into an office building behind them, cracking the ground floor windows when they hit, and fell to the sidewalk when the wind died down soon after. Rising slowly, Harry wearily summoned the Magi staff to his hand wandlessly before helping Tommy up as best he could. The other rangers all copied his motions, standing with halting motions as various parts of their bodies complained at their movement. None of them really felt much pain from the attacks as the suits absorbed nearly all of the real damage, but the impact still left them feeling a bit tender, even if it was only psychological as if they felt they should be hurt even if they really weren't. Kimberly as she stood, holding onto her head as she did. "Did anybody get the number of that bus?" "No bus, just the pexter." The monster laughed, nearly skipping as it moved closer to them. "Here, you all seem to enjoy the last one so much, why don't you have another?" As the monster opened its beak wide again, Jason was the first to react. "Look out," he shouted, grabbing a hold of a still-dazed Kimberly and Billy and diving to the side with them. "It's firing again." Harry managed to dive the other way himself, wandlessly summoning Tommy, Zack, and Trini as he went and leaving the 4 in a massive heap as the pexter's spines impacted and exploded with the side of the building accompanied by the sound of breaking glass as the windows finally shattered. As the dust around them settled slightly, Harry found himself on his back with a weight on his chest. Blinking beneath his helmet, Harry found himself staring into Trini's visor. "Well," Harry quipped, smirking slightly despite the tense situation. "Fancy meeting you here." Once again, Harry imagined he could almost feel Trini's blush through her helmet as she scrambled off of him, pausing only to help Zack and Tommy up while Harry climbed to his feet once more with the support of the Magi staff. You know, he mused, looking to the other 3 rangers to see they were climbing to their feet as well. I'm starting to get sick of using this thing as a crutch more than a weapon lately. Yeah, I know what you mean, Zack said as he clutched at a scorch mark low on his chest with his left hand. But at least we know why nothing we did earlier seemed to damage this thing. It's healing faster than we can hurt it. And that beak, it has packs a punch too, Tommy groaned, finally standing straight again. I can almost still feel it, and it hit directly on my shield. Giving off a brief sigh, Harry turned back to where the Pexter was still standing, looking like it was dancing in place as it taunted them. My guess is we'll have to hit it with everything we have all at once. Deal enough damage all at one time to destroy it as opposed to wearing it down over time. Right, the 3 rangers chanted as one, making Harry roll his eyes internally. Hey, I have a new idea, the monster shouted out once more as it stopped dancing and looked back and forth between the 2 groups of rangers. Let's try a new game. With that said, the monster opened its beak once again and fired yet another volley of spines, but these weren't aimed at the rangers. These spines impacted the ground in front of them and the building behind them, throwing up a cloud of dust and breaking yet more glass all up the side of the building as they exploded, once more blocking their view of the monster. The birds' laughter echoed around them even as Harry summoned a burst of wind to help clear the air. Catch me if you can, rangers. Over there. Kimberly shouted, a quick glance showed her pointing up into the air and, following her gesture, Harry spotted the monster flying away from them. Come on, guys. Jason commanded, already running after the Pexter. We can't let him get away. Harry watched as the 6 rangers took off on foot and was about to apparate to a rooftop to help direct them when he heard a scream. From above. Please don't leave. Help me. Looking up, Harry saw a sight that made his eyes widen. Almost directly above him was a figure, a woman based on the voice, hanging outside a window on the 4th floor. She was desperately clinging to a ledge outside the broken window, begging and screaming for help. Harry took one last quick glance toward the other rangers who were now disappearing around the side of another building in the pursuit of the monster. For Harry, there wasn't even a choice to be made. Putting his faith in the grid to help guide him and letting the power flow through him, Harry leapt straight up. In mere moments, he was even with the woman and landed lightly on the ledge she was clinging to, now with wide eyes at his stunt. Acting quickly, Harry dismissed his staff and cast a sticking charm on his own boots to provide leverage before kneeling down and grabbing onto the woman's forearms. With a simple heave, he pulled her up onto the ledge with him as if she weighed nothing. The woman almost immediately wrapped her arms around him, clinging with a desperate strength and constantly crying out her thanks and praises. For his part, Harry stayed focused as best he could. A quick glance through the broken window showed a fire burning fiercely, meaning he'd have to take her back down with him. Nodding to himself, Harry shifted his grip on the woman, scooping her up into a bridal carry before he hopped off the ledge. The woman only had a moment to scream during their freefall before they hit the ground, Harry's light crouch and a short jolt the only real sign that they'd landed. Sometimes he really liked having the grid power on his side. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, the woman was mumbling even as Harry set her feet on the sidewalk, her face still buried in his vest/cloak as she cried what he could only assume were tears of relief. Suddenly, she stiffened before looking up at his visor. But wait. Diana is still in there. Harry gave a short start. Diana? You mean someone is still in the building? The woman nodded frantically. Yes, Diana, she's one of my coworkers. We were putting in some extra hours when the battle started. The first time the building was hit, the floor below her collapsed and she fell. I went to the window to try and see what was going on when the next blast broke the glass and I fell out. Please, you have to save her. Harry cursed internally even as he extricated himself from the woman's grip. Get some distance just in case. We don't want you getting hurt anymore, yeah? After the woman nodded, tears still strkng down her face, Harry once more leapt into the air, coming to a rest on the ledge outside the broken window and climbing through it into the still burning building. Thinking fast, Harry cast a detection charm. Luckily enough, the spell told him that there was only one other person in the building. Well, he mumbled, squinting to try and see through the somewhat smoky air. That makes my job a bit easier at least. From what he could tell, it was an office building, or at least he assumed this floor was allocated for such a purpose as he made out what looked like several cubicles all across the large room he was in. It didn't take Harry much longer to find the collapsed floor either. Around 20 feet away from the broken window, the floor simply disappeared. From the edge of the hole to the far wall of the room where a small ridge stayed attached, most likely due to its proximity to the far wall. Moving to the edge of the hole, Harry cast the detection charm once again, the results telling him that the woman was somewhere below him, rather far down based on the readings and seeing as how the collapse appeared to have gone all the way down to the ground floor, but was still alive. With a nod to himself, Harry turned back to the window and took off at a run. Leaping out the window, Harry flipped once in midair before landing in a crouch and turning to face the building again, intending to head back in through the broken first-floor windows to try and get to the trapped worker. The only problem was that there was now a fire truck parked between him and the building. He was quite taken aback by this since he hadn't even heard a siren or anything while he was searching the building. "Whoa there, buddy," one fireman said as Harry landed near him. "What's the hurry?" Harry stared blankly at the man, almost wishing he could see the look of disbelief on his face through his helmet. Finally, Harry found the words to speak. "There's still someone trapped inside, the building is burning, and you're asking me what my hurry is? What the hell is your problem?" The man looked dumbfounded for a moment before responding. "So you guys really don't do it on purpose? You really don't know about it at all?" Harry nearly snapped at the man, but managed to calm himself at the last second. "What are you talking about?" The man seemed to shift uneasily for a second before looking firmly into Harry's visor. "Nobody ever gets hurt during one of you Power Rangers battles with Rita's monsters. It's strange really. We found people trapped in cars, surrounded by a perfect circle of fire, or in a pocket underneath a pile of rubble like I bet we'll find the person trapped in here, but nobody ever even has so much as a scratch on them when we get to them." Harry paused. That didn't make any sense at all. Shaking himself, Harry stepped around the man and made to move around the fire truck to continue on his self-given mission. "You'll have to excuse me if I don't take your word for it." Harry cleared the truck and was about to jump through the broken window when the same fireman grabbed his forearm. "I can't let you go in there, pal. Power Ranger or no, the building isn't safe just yet. And especially not while the fire is still burning." Harry looked around and saw that there was only the one fire truck on the scene and none of the 4 firefighters he could see seemed to be rushing to get any hoses hooked up. In fact, 2 of them seemed to be chatting with the woman he had saved from the ledge earlier. Rounding on the man who still held his arm, Harry glared. "My suit will protect me from anything the fire may be able to do, and besides, none of you seem like you can be bothered to take care of the fire just now." The man shrugged, shifting uneasily. "They've always burned out themselves before we really got set up in the past, and like I said, nobody ever got hurt, even when everything we know says they should have, so it's just easier to wait them out and then move in." Harry just stared at him for a moment. "And the fact that you feel like that is acceptable disgusts me. If there's someone trapped in there, then it's your duty to do whatever is within your power to save them, even if you don't think they'll be hurt in the end." With a jerk of his arm, Harry freed himself from the fireman's slackened grip and jumped through the broken first-floor windows. Almost immediately, Harry caught sight of the results of the collapse in the form of a pile of debris that stretched up higher than the broken ceiling. He spotted several desks, cubicle walls, and an untold amount of concrete, metal, and other materials from the floors/ceilings that had fallen when that section gave way, and all that was flammable was merrily burning away. "All right," Harry mumbled. His first thought was to start vanishing whatever was burning to clear the area, but on a second glance he decided that he couldn't risk that without knowing how rest of the building would react if he vanished the wrong thing. He definitely wouldn't want to vanish something important and bring the whole building down on himself. With a sigh he began drawing up the power from within him. "We'll do it the long way then." Pooling magic and power in his hands, Harry moved his arms forward. Aguamenti, a stream of water shot forth from each of his gloved palms and he aimed each one toward the fires closest to him, intending to clear a path to the debris pile. Even if his suit would protect him from the fire, that didn't mean that it wouldn't hurt the trapped woman on their way out. After a few minutes of dousing the flames with little result, Harry heard a scuffle behind him just before a voice sounded out. "Well, that's handy." Harry glanced back over his shoulder to see the fireman climbing through the broken window and hauling a fire hose with him. Almost immediately, the man surveyed the damage before stepping up next to Harry. No, you have to aim lower. Hit what the fire is burning with the water or else you'll never put it out. You have to soak down the fuel, you see." Taking the advice as it was intended, Harry lowered his arms slightly and watched as the fire guttered and spat almost immediately, fighting a losing battle against its elemental opposite before finally going out and letting Harry move on to the next spot. The 2 figures continued like that for several minutes, Harry spraying down various hot spots as directed by the professional while the other 3 firemen worked with the hose behind them to touch things up. Finally, they reached the pile of rubble and Harry let his water conjuring spell stop before casting the detection charm again. "All right, my spell tells me that there is one person buried about 10 feet in front of us. She's still alive, but I don't have the slightest idea as to how we can get her out of there." The man paused in thought for a moment, eyeing the smoking material in front of them critically. Finally, he sighed. Chances are that if we dig in too quickly, the rest of the pile will just shift and fill back in whatever progress we make. Our only real option is to move this stuff as safely as we can and hope to get to her before things get worse. Just then the ground below them shook violently. Harry glanced around quickly before realizing that the shaking wasn't just their building, it was everything. Somehow I think things just got worse. Feels like Rita grew her monster. The fireman cursed before stepping forward immediately and starting to throw debris away in an attempt to get to the trapped person beneath. Sighing to himself at the desperation the man was showing, Harry summoned his staff and charged it with power. It might be easier if I do this. When the fireman glanced back to see the ranger with his glowing staff, he stepped to one side, wide-eyed as Harry swished his staff and then flicked it. Wingardium Leviosa, Harry felt his magic flow out of the magi staff, penetrating through the pile of debris and finding the trapped woman. He was more than a little confused to find that she was indeed in a small, almost perfectly circular pocket in the midst of the collapse, but pushed that aside to let his magic flow around the perimeter of the area and sink several feet beyond it on all sides. "All right," Harry said, concentrating on his magic as best he could. "In a moment, I'm going to lift this stuff up magically. I'm gonna need you to grab the woman as soon as you feel you can fit through, all right? I don't know how long I'll be able to hold up this much stuff." Harry watched as the man's wide eyes narrowed with steely resolve before he nodded firmly. Nodding back, Harry let the spell take effect and raised the end of his staff, massive amounts of debris rising with it. The pile shifted with each inch that the portion affected by Harry's magic rose, and the wizard knew that it probably wasn't the most stable or safest idea he had ever had. That opinion only grew when the earth shook again below them, probably from a giant footstep from the ongoing battle, and as his own footing shifted, the floating debris shifted as well, sending more of the excess sliding to the floor. Almost as soon as the pile was around 2 feet off the ground, the fireman dove for the opening, crawling on his belly until there was enough room for him to rise to his knees, and then to a crouch. Harry was feeling the strain. He had never really tried to lift up so much at once before, but his determination held strong. His saving people thing demanded no less. Finally, after a minute or so that seemed to last much longer, Harry heard a shocked gasp and some muffled words coming from the hole. Not long after, a head of dirty, blonde hair came crawling out of the passage, quickly followed by the rest of the woman in a desperate scramble to freedom. Right on her heels came the fireman, and as soon as he was clear, Harry let the spell end, causing the debris to drop and kick up a pile of dust accompanied by a few sparks and embers. "All right, Magi Ranger," the fireman said. "If there's nobody else in here, we should pull back. The fire is dying off on its own already, like I mentioned earlier, but it's never good to be in a building that may be structurally unsound while the whole city is shaking this much." Nodding even as his own footing shifted as a result of the aforementioned shaking, Harry turned and followed the fireman back to the broken window. The other members of his crew had already pulled back, presumably with the woman they had rescued, and so Harry himself was the last one to hop out of the broken window and into pandemonium. Where before there had been only one fire truck, there were now 4, the associated firefighters spraying into the upper windows of the building he had just left in an attempt to help finish off the fire, and accompanying them were a pair of ambulances and a news van from one of Angel Grove's local news stations. As soon as they came out of the window, a cheer went up from a crowd of civilians who were standing across the street. There looked to be several dozen of them just standing there watching and waiting for the rescue in progress to finish up, apparently unconcerned with the giant monster battle happening nearby. Before he could do anything else, Harry heard his communicator go off. "Magi Ranger," Zordon's voice called out. "The other rangers need help. I know you are occupied at the moment and are unable to assist directly, but if you call your Zord it should help turn the tides of battle." Nodding to himself, Harry brought his communicator up. "Roger that, Zordon." Lowering his arm, and more than a little aware of the watching crowd, Harry swapped his staff into his left hand and threw his right arm up into the air, letting out a pulse of magic. "I call upon the Silver Owl Zord." With a familiar screech, accompanied this time by the enthusiastic cheering from the watching crowd, Hedwig appeared in the sky in her giant Zord form. "Harry/Wizard," the bird queried, her confusion coming across clear through their mental connection since he didn't call her by name. "You go ahead and help the others, Hedwig," Harry sent her mentally as he began walking toward the crowd. "I have to stay and deal with these people for a moment. I have no clue why they think it's a good idea to stick around like this, but you can bet I'm going to find out. Now go and show that walking feather duster what a real bird can do." Harry could almost feel Hedwig's smirk. "Very well, Harry/Wizard. Be careful with the sheep people." Harry rolled his eyes as Hedwig flapped her wings a few times before firing up her rockets with a screech and shooting off toward the battle to the accompaniment of even more cheers. In his mind's eye, Harry could almost see the moment she made her first impact with the Pexter, mostly helped by the fact that the ground shook rather badly when it happened. As Harry shifted as best he could to remain upright, someone else wasn't as capable and crashed into him, knocking them both to the ground. Harry glanced down toward his chest to see the same reporter who had interviewed Marie after the Mutatus battle lying on him with a dazed look on her face. Harry found himself unable to speak, but luckily enough he didn't have to. The simple noise was enough for the reporter to snap out of her daze and realize where she was and what had happened. With a bright blush, the woman climbed off of him almost before Harry even realized it and began dusting herself off. As Harry too regained his feet, he saw her glance to the side before looking back at him. Harry followed her look to see a cameraman standing nearby, the device pointing toward them. Further musing was cut off as the woman shoved a microphone in front of his helmet. "Lauren McAllister, Channel 3 News. Magi Ranger, can you tell me what happened here today?" Harry just blinked. Finally, as the ground shook again, he snapped out of his stupor enough to give a response. "Really?" he said, incredulously. "You really think that this is the best time for this to happen? Right now? When the other Power Rangers are fighting against the monster that caused this damage and made the rescue necessary? You think now is the right time to try and get an interview from me?" The woman blushed again, but kept the microphone held out. Harry just sighed. "Ma'am, I apologize if I offend you, but are you completely mental?" The reporter recoiled slightly, drawing the microphone back to herself before speaking. "Well, it's just that you Power Rangers always disappear after each battle before anyone can get to you, so I thought. You thought that you'd interrupt me before I could go join my teammates in the fight to defend the city? You thought you'd keep me from the fight so you could ask a few questions." Harry shook his head. "Ma'am, I appreciate your dedication to your work, but I really think that you should dash." Harry's words were cut off by the sound of an explosion happening overhead. He whipped his head up in time to see several blurred objects strike the top of the building that had already suffered so much damage in the battle today and explode violently enough to dislodge a large section of the wall. In the back of his mind, Harry noted that the flying objects had most likely been some of the Pexter's exploding spines, but that thought was set aside by firm resolve as he whipped his staff around and snagged the falling chunk of building in a levitation charm, bringing it to a stop mere feet before it would have crushed himself, the reporter and her cameraman, the fireman, and several of the nearby pedestrians. Panting slightly as he floated the chunk of brick and metal a bit higher, Harry turned his attention back to the now very pale reporter. "I think that you, and all the civilians over there, need to clear off. Seek shelter until the battle ends." The woman could only nod shakily before turning and near sprinting back to her news van with the cameraman right on her heels. It only took a glance to the side to see the people who had heard his comment spreading the word frantically as the crowd broke up. "Wow!" Harry turned the other way to see the same fireman from before walking up next to him, looking up at the chunk of building still floating overhead. "It's a really good thing you were here today." Harry merely grunted in acknowledgement before an idea struck him. "Tell me, is this piece of building important for anything? I mean, is it needed to help put the building back together or anything? I'm afraid I don't know much about construction, so..." The fireman looked at him confused for a moment before responding. No, not really. Normally a chunk that size would have broken apart when it hit the ground. Even now, they'll probably just end up shipping that chunk out and using all new materials to repair the building. It really can't be put back in place or anything. Probably wouldn't be very structurally sound even if we could get it back up there." Harry shrugged. "Well, technically I could float it back up there and then repair it good as new with magic, but I had a thought that maybe we should give this chunk of stone back to the monster who tried to give it to us. It's only fair, right?" The man's confused look persisted for a few seconds until understanding dawned and the look was replaced by a smirk. Nodding, the fireman glanced up at the large chunk of stone. "Yes, I do believe that would be quite thoughtful." Harry smirked under his helmet before levitating the floating stone higher and higher until it passed beyond the tops of the nearby buildings. "Hedwig," he sent. "I have something that I would like you to return to the Pexter for me. Do you think you're up for a DLVRY?" He could feel Hedwig's amusement when she realized his plan. "Of course, Harry/Wizard. I shall deliver this package as quickly as possible." Hedwig made a wide turn around the area before snatching the chunk of stone out of the air. The section of building was almost a quarter her size, but she managed to carry it all the same with the help of her rocket boosters. Before Harry could do anything else, the fireman cleared his throat, drawing Harry's attention once more. "Look, Magi Ranger, I just wanted to apologize." The man looked rather uncomfortable with his apology, but kept going nonetheless. "You were right. We've been taking this strange protection for granted, but no more. It's our job to save the people in the city when things go wrong. Now we know we can't do much against all those monsters, that's your guys' job, but we can do what we need to clean up afterwards. I just wanted to apologize to you for what I said and did, or rather what I wasn't doing. It won't happen again. Nodding once more to the fireman, resting a hand on his shoulder. I know you didn't mean any harm by it, but whatever it is that's protecting people, you can't lean on it if you don't understand it. And even if you did understand it, it's no excuse to let people suffer while trapped like what happened today. I know you won't let it happen again though, and I'm counting on you to spread the word. We'll handle Rita, but the emergency service workers of Angel Grove still need to step up your own games as best you can. Seeing the man taking his message to heart, Harry twisted in place, apparating to the top of another building so that he could see the ongoing battle. As it turned out, the fight was only a few blocks away, which explained the frequency and intensity of the shaking. Harry immediately recognized the Dragonzord in battle mode fighting alongside the Tyrannosaurus Rex Dinozord against the Pexter. The monster was still covered in the scorch trails from Harry's earlier Levin bolt, but had very few damage marks otherwise. In the meantime, the two Zords were covered in scorch marks and the Rex seemed to be having trouble moving very well, resulting in it staying out of the battle as best it could. And then in swooped Hedwig, smashing the chunk of building over the back of the Pexter's head end, knocking it to the ground, driving its beak into the earth once again. What in the world was that? The monster screeched after freeing itself from the ground and clambering back to its feet. Any further squawking was cut off as the monster found the Dragonzord's spear waiting for it and drilling a large hole through its chest. Oh, the monster mumbled before falling back to the ground once more and exploding while the Dragonzord posed dramatically nearby. Harry just chuckled before teleporting back to the command center. Satisfied in a job well done. Harry's satisfaction lasted for all of 3 minutes. That was about how long it took for the other Rangers to teleport in and for Harry to see their grim and somewhat irritated-looking faces. All right, Harry sighed. What's going on? Predictably, it was Jason who stepped up to speak for the other 5. Where did you go, Harry? Harry was confused and voiced such. What do you mean? Jason growled. I mean, where were you during the battle? You vanished just before the monster grew and didn't show up again until the very end. We nearly got creamed out there and could have really used your help. If you hadn't vanished, we might have been able to beat that thing before Rita grew it. Harry narrowed his eyes at the Red Ranger. Well, you know, I would have been there right next to you guys if I hadn't been forced to save a couple of civilians from a burning office building that was damaged during the battle. I would have been right behind you, except one of them nearly fell from a 4th-story window just as the monster flew away after it grew back its wing. All of the Rangers but Jason recoiled slightly, understanding now dawning in their eyes at Harry's explanation. Jason's eyes narrowed a bit, but his aggressive stance remained unchanged. Harry soldiered on. And did you guys know that, according to the firemen I spoke with, none of the rescue teams in the city have been actually putting forward any effort in trying to save people who are caught in the aftermath of our battles lately? Yeah, apparently they're convinced that nobody ever gets hurt so they can take it easy until they feel like going in after them. The firemen I talked to said that they were going to wait until the fire burned itself out before trying to go in and save a person that had been trapped in a building collapse. Zordon cut across Harry's rant even as the Rangers' faces all took on looks of shock and disbelief. In point of fact, Harry, those people were never in any true danger. Harry rounded on the elder wizard in a heartbeat, his face showing his outrage. You'll have to forgive me for disagreeing, Zordon, but I certainly consider being trapped in a potentially unstable, partially collapsed, burning building to be quite dangerous. Zordon merely sighed before firming up his face. It appears I have some explaining to do, Rangers. But first, let me ask you all a question. Have you ever wondered why it is that Rita only attacks here, in Angel Grove? The Rangers were taken aback by this seemingly random tangent, but exchanged looks for several moments until Trini finally spoke up. I have wondered about that a few times, but never really said anything. Yeah, Zach said, scuffing one shoe on the floor awkwardly. I mean, if Rita is trying to take over the world, why would she attack here all the time? Wouldn't she be better off going after the capital or something? Bigger targets and all that. Harry saw the point Zach was trying to make and realized it did make sense. Why was Rita only attacking Angel Grove? Zordon was quick to provide the answer. The reason behind her targeting only this city is also the reason why those people were never in any danger, Harry. Every 20,000 years, the morphing grid shifts its focal points. These focal points are locations where the grid's power can most easily be accessed and are always the locations of fierce battles between good and evil as they try to claim or protect them. And let me guess, Harry drawled, sighing heavily. Angel Grove is one of these focal points? Zordon bobbed his head in a nod. Indeed it is so, Harry. This is why Rita attacks here constantly. She is attempting to establish her own control over the area, mostly by driving my own presence out, so that she may tap directly into the grid's power, greatly increasing her own strength and all but ensuring her takeover of the Earth. So how long exactly has this focal point been here? Kimberly asked. It sometimes takes thousands of years for a focal point to be discovered once they have moved. It is believed that the one under Angel Grove was here for nearly 5,000 years before it was discovered. It was only shortly after Rita and I arrived here to begin our battle that we were each trapped by the other, myself in the time warp and Rita in the space dumpster. For the 10,000 years I have been trapped, Alpha 5 has helped me set up this command center and cement the hold I have over this focal point to protect it from the forces of evil. Zordon turned his attention to Harry. The fireman you spoke with referred to no one ever being injured in the aftermath of the battles with Rita. This is because the grid actively protects all those in and around its focal points that are not directly involved in the battles for control over it. In addition, since this area falls under the banner of the forces of good, an attitude of kindness and helpfulness pervades all those within Angel Grove as well. This is also why there is so little actual crime in this city. Most people who live here cannot even think such negative thoughts that would lead to criminal behavior, and those who do are really quite dark in their core. Zack snorted suddenly, choking back laughter. Upon seeing everyone's eyes on him, he offered an explanation. I'm just picturing Bulk and Skull as being bad guys. Those two and their little gang are really the only ones who can even come close to that description that I know of. Zordon nodded once again. Indeed, Zack. In truth, Bulk, Skull, and their group of friends and associates would have been quite the threat to anyone and everyone around them were it not for the positive influence of the grid over them. It is slowly changing their nature, which is why they seem as inept and bumbling as they are, but were it not for that, there is no telling how they would have turned out. Harry let his mind wander to the thought of a truly bad Bulk and Skull, but had a great deal of difficulty imagining it. He had seen some of how bad a bully could be through his childhood with the Dursleys, particularly Dudley, but he still had problems picturing Bulk as cruel and vindictive. Shaking himself from his thoughts, Harry returned his attention to Zordon. But in the end, Zordon, no matter what protections there are for these people, it only stops them from being injured or killed. Those firemen were willing to wait for who knows how long before even getting started on trying to get that woman out of the building. I just couldn't leave her there once I was told. He turned back toward the still grumpy Jason. I will admit that I should have told you all where I was and what I was doing. It was wrong of me to just vanish in the middle of a battle like that, and I will promise to do my best to avoid that in the future, but I won't stand by and let anyone suffer if there is something I can do about it. It's just not in my nature. Jason glanced around at the other Rangers, looking for the support he had. Once had that now seemed to be wavering. In a last attempt to make his point, he turned back to Harry again. Look, Zordon just told us that those people were in no danger, Harry. You didn't need to go after them today and you won't need to in the future. They're safe until the rescue workers can reach them. Harry scowled. And I am going to do whatever I can to get them out quicker if I can. That woman today was in an area she couldn't even sit up straight in. Trapped under who knows how much debris and unable to escape on her own. That kind of thing gets to a person. I will not let anyone suffer if I can help it. And if you think you can tell me not to, well, you're going to be very disappointed. Billy stepped up and placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. If nothing else, Jason, Harry's actions would prevent a great deal of psychological stress and potential damage to those he rescues. Yeah man, Zack followed up. And he did promise not to run off on us again like he did today. And I trust him to not run off in the middle of a battle if we really need his help. Tommy said, smiling at Harry from behind the Red Ranger. If we really need him, he will be there for us. Just like he came through with Hedwig and that distraction today that let us finish off that bird brain for good. Jason said nothing for a bit. His thoughts clearly racing as he stood with his eyes closed. Finally, he sighed and opened them again. You're right. You're all right. I'm sorry for flying off the handle like that, Harry. I thought you had just run off on us, but you had a very good reason for doing it. Jason offered a hand to Harry which the wizard took, giving it a firm shake before releasing it again. No worries, Jason. Harry gave a slightly tense smile. Just keep in mind that I am known for being rather impulsive in my old world. Hermione once told me that I have a saving people thing, and this is just one example of it. But I will promise that I'll let you all know if I feel the need to run off again. And, as Tommy said, I won't do it if I'm really needed in battle. Jason nodded. That'll be good enough for me. It was a few hours later that Harry and the Rangers were all at the youth center. Harry had just finished up a short shift behind the snack bar and was now sitting at a table, petting Hedwig and watching Jason, Tommy, Billy, and Zach take turns sparring on one of the mats while Kimberly and Trini did some gymnastics work on another. Hedwig had her eyes mostly closed in contentment from Harry's ministrations while the Magi Ranger let his thoughts once more wander over his problems. On top of his housing situation, his money situation, his ever-growing physical exhaustion, and the apparently not quite all gone but much reduced animosity Jason felt for him, he now had the thought of keeping everyone else in the city safe during Ranger battles. And unlike in his last world where he really couldn't be held responsible for the safety of everyone fighting against Voldemort, here in this dimension as a Power Ranger he really was responsible in a roundabout way. It was really becoming too much to handle if he was honest. Suddenly, Hedwig's eyes opened fully and she turned her head to look over his shoulder. Harry/Wizard, Big Knot Cousin is approaching from behind with a net. Skinny Knot Cousin is behind him with another one. Harry sighed internally. Bulk, Skull, what exactly are you guys trying to do? He heard a scuffle behind him and turned to see what was going on as people around him started laughing. It seemed as though Bulk and Skull had been startled by Harry's sudden question and had somehow managed to trip each other up in such a way that they ended up sitting on the ground with the pair of nets they each held ending up around the other's head. How did you know we were here? Bulk demanded as he struggled up off the ground, nearly ripping the net off of his head. Harry shrugged. Hedwig reacted and I took a shot in the dark. Bulk seemed to think about it for a second before his eyes widened. You can talk to your owl? Harry, internally panicking, rolled his eyes. No, Bulk, but anyone who is used to an animal can read certain cues about them. And as I know you two are the only ones who might try and sneak up behind me like that, he shrugged again. Anyway, what exactly did you think you were going to do with those butterfly nets? Bulk suddenly seemed to realize he still had his net in hand and quickly tried to hide it behind his back. The problem was that it was too long and the net portion of it still flopped over onto the top of his head. Nothing at all. Skull looked confused. But, Bulk, I thought you said we were gonna catch his owl and turn him in for having an illegal animal to get him into trouble. Bulk's face went red as he slowly turned to face Skull. I might have said that, dimwit, but that doesn't mean you were supposed to tell him. Bulk jabbed a finger in Harry's direction prompting Skull to look toward him and then back at Bulk. Oh, the skinny teen said, then his eyes widened. He seemed to then realize that he had already ruined their plot. Oh, Skull slumped slightly before smiling brightly loudly chewing on his gum. Sorry Bulk. I forgot about that part. Harry just rolled his eyes before fishing a card out of his pocket and holding it out to Bulk. Besides, Bulk, this card is my license to own Hedwig here, and as long as Ernie has no problem with her hanging around the youth center with me, there's nothing wrong with her being here. Bulk snatched the card before squinting at it for a minute, turning it this way and that as he tried to decipher it. Finally, Bulk grunted and all but threw the card back to Harry who casually snatched it out of the air like it was a snitch. Why do you have that owl, anyway? The wizard shrugged as he put his license away. I've had her since I was 11, Bulk, as I believe I've already told you. She's my pet and friend. I don't see how I need a reason beyond that. Bulk seemed to study him for a moment before looking intently at Hedwig and then back at Harry. Finally his eyes widened dramatically. I know what it is. You're trying to imitate that new Magi Ranger guy, aren't you? Bulk started laughing hysterically, a laugh that Skull quickly joined with even though he still looked confused. For his part, Harry was sweating a bit but did his best to remain outwardly calm. I can assure you, Bulk, that is the furthest thing from the truth. He had no reason to imitate the Magi Ranger since he was the Magi Ranger after all. The overweight teen just snorted as his laughter died down. Yeah right, nerd. Skull immediately parroted him. Yeah, nerd. Bulk continued on, ignoring his friend. Look, I'm close friends with the Magi Ranger. You may have heard that Skull and I helped him chase off the giant gold guy a while ago. But the point is that there is no way acting like him could help someone as geeky as you to fit in. Bulk snorted again. The next thing you know you'll be dressing up as a magician and trying to do magic like the Magi Ranger does too. Bulk and Skull turned and stomped off, still laughing, but Harry wasn't paying them any more attention. For some reason, part of what Bulk had said stuck with him. He had a lot of problems right now, but easily half of them revolved around his lack of funds. He needed another job of some kind, and what better way for a wizard on his own to make some money in the non-magical world than as a performing magician? Order up. Harry placed a tray of food on the counter before making his way back to the grill and began scrubbing it clean. It was yet another day of work at the youth center. School had just let out and the first of the after-school rush crowd was already arriving. Jason, Billy, Trini, and Zach had arrived as well and were out on the mats. Zach and Jason were doing some light sparring while Trini taught Billy some of her kung fu-style moving meditation exercises. Harry, of course, was working. As soon as the grill was clean, he threw another batch of hamburger patties down while Ernie worked at the other side of the counter, making experimental smoothies with various exotic fruits. This was a hobby that the Jolly Youth Center owner had taken up fairly recently, and it was rather lucky for the Rangers that he had. Just a few days ago, the day after the Pexter attacked, Rita had sent down a two-headed parrot monster. The unique thing about this monster was that each head, one situated as normal and the other in the center of its chest, could each control their body and react while the other planned and plotted. The fact that this monster was slightly more intelligent than others they had fought meant that the Rangers were hard-pressed to outwit it, even with Harry's magic backing them up. Ultimately, Alpha had somehow determined that parrot monster liked some kind of fruit that Harry had never heard of. As it turned out, this fruit was on the list of fruits that Ernie had purchased for his experimental smoothies, and Tommy was able to get one from him. When presented with the fruit, the two heads of the monster had started fighting over it, which gave the Rangers enough time to finish it off with the power blaster. It had been the first time since Tommy joined the team that Rita had actually sent down two monsters in as many days, so the Rangers had all been rather tense. This tense attitude had lasted for 2 days before Zach's laid-back attitude had fully reasserted itself, causing the others to relax more in response to his usual antics. For his part, Harry hadn't been much affected either way. His experience in his own world made him appreciate the downtimes between battles, no matter how short or long they may be, helping him stay loose despite Rita's actions. Of course, this didn't really change much as he was still busy as he could be with other activities. Harry had done some more pondering on Bulk's unwitting suggestion and had decided to give it a shot. He had spoken with the other Rangers and Zordon about him becoming a performing magician, and, while the Rangers were somewhat confused by his longing to do so, they were tentatively supporting. The only real issue they could bring up was in regard to Bulk's assumption that he was already trying to imitate the Magi Ranger with Hedwig and what kind of attention the bully's big mouth could bring to him. Zordon had helped put any fears to rest when he explained how their connection to the grid would help hide their identities as the Power Rangers so long as they didn't willfully expose themselves. It was this more than anything else that settled Harry's concerns and took the thought closer to action. He next spoke with Ernie, who had reacted in his usual jovial fashion and expressed a willingness, and indeed a certain level of eagerness, in hosting a magic show at the youth center to help him get started. Apparently, they had had talent shows there in the past, and he didn't really see how more similar events could be a bad thing. The businessman inside him certainly wouldn't be complaining about the extra concession sales he would receive in any case. Kimberly, upon first hearing his idea, had mentioned a small magic shop in the mall and had offered to bring him along sometime, but had also cautioned him that props like that could be rather expensive. And so it was decided that once Harry had built up his savings a bit more, they would make a trip to the mall, a concept that sent a shiver down his spine if he was honest. He was more than prepared to transfigure and or conjure most of what he might need, but knew that he would need some examples to work from first. After another 10 minutes or so of cooking burgers, hot dogs, French fries, and mixing together various salads and other side items while Hedwig made an occasional comment from her perch in the rafters overhead, Harry's attention was caught by a rather disheveled-looking Tommy, near sprinting into the youth center. The initial food rush had tapered off, and so Harry was able to talk to Tommy the moment he reached the counter. "Harry," he panted. "We've got a problem. Do you know where the others are?" Harry blinked several times before nodding. "Yeah, they're over there." He nodded toward the mats and took the chance to give Tommy a once-over when he spun to see for himself. The Ranger looked rather worse for wear at first glance. He was covered with bits of leaves and there were smudges of dirt all over his clothes and face. On top of the wide-eyed look and the panting from what must have been a flat-out run from wherever he had been, Harry was more than a bit concerned for his friend/sensei. Tommy turned back to Harry. "All right, I'll go get them. Can you meet us at the command center?" Realizing that Tommy's problem was most likely of the Rita variety, Harry nodded grimly. "Yeah, I should be able to join you soon. Just let me talk to Ernie real quick." Tommy wasted no time before jogging over to the other Rangers while Harry made his way over to stand by Ernie. "Hey Ernie," Harry said, drawing Ernie's attention away from his most recent fruit concoction in the blender. "Something has kind of come up. Do you mind if I go ahead and take off for the afternoon?" Ernie gave Harry a quizzical look before glancing out at the rest of the youth center. Harry saw his eyes narrow and followed his gaze to where Tommy was explaining things to the now panicked-looking Rangers. "All right." Ernie's voice snapped Harry's attention back to the grimly nodding face of his boss. "Go do what you have to do, Harry. I can hold down the fort here well enough. After all, I've been doing it for years before you came along." The last was said with a smile that Harry quickly found himself returning. Thanks, Ernie. I owe you one. Harry said before stripping his apron off and hanging it up as he moved from behind the counter. Harry took one last look at Ernie as the man gave a wistful look at his blender before shutting it off and taking in the rest of the snack bar. Without Harry there to help, the man wouldn't be able to indulge in his new hobby/obsession as much, and Harry did feel a bit bad about that, but he had bigger responsibilities to deal with. All the same, as Harry whistled for Hedwig, who quickly flew down to perch on his shoulder as he joined the other Rangers, Harry couldn't help but ponder about Ernie's reaction when Harry had asked for the rest of the afternoon off. There was something going on there, but he just couldn't figure out what. Once the Rangers had arrived in the command center and exchanged greetings with Zordon and Alpha, Tommy settled down to explain the situation. Kimberly was having a really bad day today. Yeah, Trini commented. I saw her this morning. Her umbrella inverted in the storm this morning and she got soaked, and her pep rally plans were ruined at the same time. Seeing everyone's eyes on her, Trini blushed slightly before apologizing and ceding the floor to Tommy once more. So after I found Bulk and Skull were harassing her this morning, I decided to try and cheer her up by offering to walk her home. Tommy seemed oblivious to the smiles and knowing looks of the other Rangers. Even Zordon had a smirk on his face. We were walking from school and took a detour through the park. Harry was suddenly struck with how often things in Angel Grove happened in and around the park. With Zordon's revelation about Angel Grove housing one of the grid's focal points, it might be worthwhile to look into its actual location and whether or not it might be in or near Angel Grove Park specifically. While we were there, one of Rita's monsters attacked us. Everyone listening tensed up. While they had all certainly expected Rita to have been involved, hearing confirmation of it still put them on edge. Alpha, Zordon commanded immediately. Begin a sensor sweep of Angel Grove for any sign of Rita's most recent monster. Right away, Zordon. Alpha responded. Nodding, Zordon turned his attention back to Tommy. Please continue, Tommy. Taking a moment to gather himself again, Tommy started speaking. It looked kind of like a samurai. I mean, it looked like it was wearing armor like that, you know? But anyway, it had this jug hanging from its hip, and when it opened it, something shot out of it and knocked me over. I hit my head and don't remember much after that, but I do remember Kimberly being pulled into the monster's jug. Ay. Alpha suddenly shouted just as the command center's alarms started blaring. Look, Zordon. I have the monster on the viewing globe. Almost as one, the Rangers turned toward the glowing orb. Next to Harry, Tommy's face grew serious. Yeah, that's the one. There on the viewing globe was a surprisingly humanoid-looking monster, if of course the human's face had been frozen into an impossibly wide, fanged grin like an old-style samurai demon mask. There were multiple golden spikes sticking out from either side of its head, and there was a red crest of some kind on top of its helmet. It was wearing, as Tommy had indicated, black samurai-style armor with various gold-colored symbols and studs, with a white sash tied around its waist and a large gourd jug hanging from its left hip with a cork in the opening. It is as I had feared, Zordon intoned deeply as the Rangers turned to face him again. This monster is known as the Samurai Fan Man and is another of Rita's more powerful monsters. It is known for its stealth and traps, particularly the gourd you see hanging from its waist. Within this gourd is a pocket dimension that only lasts for a limited amount of time. When the dimension vanishes, so too does anything trapped within it. So how do we get Kimberly out? Trini asked, the concern for her friend obvious in her voice. You must take the gourd from the Fan Man and open it yourselves with the intent to free that which is trapped within. If you do so, the magic of the gourd will be reversed and Kimberly will be freed. How long do we have? Tommy asked, idly brushing some of the still clinging debris off of himself as he did so. Harry idly waved his hand, casting a cleaning charm and removing the rest for him, and received a smile and nod in thanks while Zordon answered the question. The pocket dimension within the gourd is created when something is pulled inside and begins destabilizing immediately. From the time of its creation, it takes 3 hours for the dimension to vanish completely. This time limit is also refreshed should the Fan Man capture anything else, as the pocket dimension must be restabilized before it can accept any new prisoners. Alright, we're working on a time limit, guys. Jason stepped forward, his steely gaze washing over the others. Let's morph and go save Kimberly. Right, the Rangers chanted, Harry joining them for once. The threat to their friend and teammate was more than enough to overcome his reluctance to give in to the grid's longing for dramatic flair. Jason nodded before turning away from them again. It's morphin' time. According to Alpha's readings, the Samurai Fan Man was still in the park, relatively near where Tommy said he and Kimberly had been attacked, so that was where the Rangers teleported to. What they weren't expecting was to immediately find the Fan Man, along with Golder, Squat, and Babu, sitting around a low, stone table and eating while being served by a sizable group of putties wearing brightly colored vests. "Ah, Power Rangers," the samurai called. "Welcome to the Putty Bowl restaurant." Harry resisted the urge to try and scratch his head in confusion. Not only would it serve no real purpose since he was wearing his suit, but he simply refused to show any sign that the monster had confused him with the strangeness of the situation. Jason was either unaffected or was planning to bluster his way through. "Where's Kimberly?" The Fan Man stood from his kneeling position and lifted his gourd jug that had been hidden behind him when the Rangers arrived. Laughing darkly, he attached the gourd to his sash again and patted it. "Oh, you want your little ranger friend back, eh? Well then come and get her." The monster flung its hands out wide and the dozen or so putties around the restaurant scrambled to form a group between the Rangers and the monsters. Golder too had risen from the table, but was merely standing with his arms crossed, a smirk across his simian face. Squat and Babu were still kneeling at the table, each drinking deeply from what looked like clay jars of some kind with oriental writing on them. "All right, Rangers," Jason called out, drawing and brandishing his blade blaster. "Let's take these guys down." Following Jason's charge, Harry and the other Rangers ran to meet the also charging group of putties. Almost at once, Harry found himself being approached by a putty in a purple vest. Feeling somewhat offended by the clay construct wearing what he sometimes thought of as his color, even if that was only because of the grid's influence on him, Harry easily sidestepped the creature's first clumsy punch before dropping down and sweeping its feet out from underneath it. Moving quickly, Harry hopped up into the air, planting his boots into the chest of the downed putty before using it as a springboard and leaping up higher and flipping once only to practically land on the shoulders of another putty, locking his knees around its neck. The putty stumbled back into another as Harry's weight hit it, but the Magi Ranger used that moment of distraction to throw his upper body back, setting his hands on the ground with a sticking charm for leverage, and pulling the putty up and over, flipping it through the air to land on top of the purple-vested one, once more knocking it flat to the ground. Moving to stand on his feet, Harry turned to the putty that had caught his second victim. This putty seemed somehow more capable than its fellows as it blocked and dodged Harry's first few punches and countered by shifting its hand into a large ball and smashing that onto Harry's left shoulder. Grunting as he took the blow, Harry quickly wrapped his left arm around the construct's arm, trapping it in place. As the putty struggled, seemingly beginning to panic, Harry shifted around, putting his back toward the putty before heaving it up and over his shoulder. He then released it at the top of its arc so it flew through the air before landing atop the now three-high pile of putties he had made. Smiling with grim satisfaction, Harry stepped a bit closer to the putties before extending his right hand toward them, palm out with fingers splayed. "Incendio!" Harry intoned, casting the wandless spell as a stream of flame that quickly engulfed the three putties and reduced them to ash in seconds. Once he cut the spell off, he examined his right hand only to find the glove slightly scorched by the backlash of his wandless spell but otherwise pain-free. Nodding to himself, Harry internally marveled at how much difference his short time learning with Tommy had improved his abilities to fight in Morph. Even with guidance from the grid, he hadn't truly expected to have so little trouble with the putties. An increase in the volume of the background noise caused by the putties caught Harry's attention. Turning, he saw an entirely new wave of putties, identified as such by their lack of vests, were now charging headlong towards where he and the Rangers were at. Smirking beneath his helmet, Harry decided to have a bit of fun and ceded more control to the energies of the morphing grid. Hopping slightly, Harry broke into a dead sprint toward the approaching putties, gathering power to his hands as he did so. Just as he came within reach of the first one, he flung his arms downward, releasing the gathered power in a burst just as he leapt into the air. The resulting explosion not only took out the first few unprepared putties, but it also served to propel him further upward. Flipping a few times, Harry brought his feet down just in time to deliver a powerful double kick to the chest of a putty patroller near the middle of the pack, riding the unfortunate construct down to the ground in a crouch before rolling off of it to bleed off the rest of his momentum. Without even a moment's pause for thought, Harry planted his right hand onto the grass, using it as a pivot point and lashing out with both legs, striking the nearest pair of putties with powerful kicks further augmented by a burst of power that sent them flying backwards into their brethren. Still smirking, Harry righted himself before blocking a punch from one putty and redirecting another attack into the chest of a third. By this point, most of the putty pack had made the decision to get as far away from the Magi Ranger as possible, hoping to have a better chance of fighting the other 5 Rangers than they would against him. Harry was just having too much fun to care. Backing up a few steps from the 3 putties that had stayed near him, Harry took a fighting stance before gesturing on of them forward. "Come on then," he taunted the creatures. "Bring it on." The nearest putty tilted its head in confusion for a moment before dashing forward, shifting its right hand into a long blade as it did and making a vertical slice with it. Harry, still awash in the grid's power, slid to one side, letting the blade cut through the air just to his left before lashing out with a spin kick that flipped the putty head over heels and out of commission. The last two charged him together, but their generally uncoordinated attacks meant that he was able to redirect and dodge their attacks almost without effort. Finding an opening, Harry ducked out of the way just as they each launched a kick from either side of him, resulting in them tripping each other up and falling to the ground where Harry finished them with a pair of wandless reductos. "So, it seems like someone has been practicing," Golder drawled as he stepped into Harry's line of sight. The Magi Ranger glanced over to the others quickly, seeing that they had been drawn away slightly by the remaining putties, but it wouldn't be much longer before they had dealt with them. "Well, you know what they say, Golder," Harry shrugged before settling into a fighting stance. "Practice makes perfect. And I could hardly get much worse than I was. I am more than willing to admit that much. Though that still hasn't really prevented me from being able to deal with you every time we've met, now has it?" Golder growled, glaring at him. "Don't get cocky, Magling. I think you will soon find that the gap in our respective abilities is still as large as it always was, no matter how much practicing you do." With that, the monster charged toward Harry, thankfully without his sword at the moment, and launched a vicious right hook at his head. Harry ducked quickly, avoiding the punch before launching a jab of his own into Golder's armored stomach. The biggest problem with this was that Golder didn't seem to react to the hit at all, which meant that Harry was completely unprepared when the monster's knee was driven into Harry's stomach. As Harry found himself doubled over, gasping for breath, Golder heaved him up by the collar of his cloak. "As I said, Magling, you shouldn't get cocky." Golder glanced up quickly before spinning the still-winded Magi Ranger around, holding him in place with his left arm while summoning his sword in his right and holding the tip to the side of his head. "Stop where you are, Rangers." Harry managed to focus enough to see the other 5 Rangers skidding to a stop from their charge toward him. They had apparently dealt with the rest of the putties in time to see him get nabbed by Golder and had been attempting to rescue him again. He had really hoped he was over that part of this whole Power Ranger business. "Let him go, Golder," Jason shouted, gesturing dramatically as he did so. Golder just laughed. "I think not, puny Power Rangers. Fan Man. Now." The samurai Fan Man, somehow forgotten up to this point, stepped into view off to Harry's right. With another bout of rather dark laughter, the monster summoned a long war fan before waving it repeatedly at the Rangers. Almost immediately, a strong wind kicked up accompanied by short bursts of energy that sent sparks flying from the Rangers' suits when they hit. "You look a little warm, Power Rangers," the samurai taunted. "Maybe this will cool you off." With one final heave, the monster released a burst of energy from its fan accompanied by the strongest gust of wind yet that managed to knock the Rangers off their feet and blow them up and over some nearby trees and out of sight. "And now for you, Magi Ranger," the Fan Man said as it turned to face him, idly tossing the war fan aside where it vanished in mid-flight. "Empress Rita gave me special instructions to take no chances with you, so in you go." With a short grunt, the monster removed the cork in the mouth of its jug, allowing a stream of yellow energy to flow out, spinning into a tornado between the monster and the captive Harry. Golder's laughter echoed in Harry's ears as Rita's general bashed him over the back of the head with the pommel of his sword and shoved him into the vortex of power. As darkness grew over his consciousness, Harry felt a vague spinning feeling before he was sucked into the pocket dimension within the Fan Man's jar. Harry groaned slightly as he started to rise back into consciousness. The first thing he noticed was a throbbing pain in the back of his skull where Golder had struck him. The second thing he noticed was the hand lightly slapping his right cheek, accompanied by a worried voice. "Come on, Harry, wake up, please wake up." Gathering himself, Harry groaned once more, louder this time, as he raised his right hand, the one not pinned up against Kimberly, and tenderly prodded at his sore head. "Did anybody see the bludger that hit me?" Kimberly let out a nervous chuckle, more in relief than at his poor joke that she probably didn't even understand anyway, and helped Harry sit up when he moved to do so. "How are you feeling, Harry?" Harry blinked as he looked around. Them. The last thing he remembered was the energy coming from the Fan Man's jar before he blacked out. Based on the fact that Kimberly was there with him and the walls around them appeared similar to the gourd jar the monster had, logic dictated that he was now trapped inside the jar as well. Oddly enough, Harry shrugged, turning back to face Kimberly. "Pretty lousy. How long was I out?" Kimberly returned Harry's shrug as she stood up and helped Harry do the same when he realized that they had been sitting/lying in an inch-deep layer of liquid with fog swirling off of it. "Not too long. Probably only 5 or 10 minutes, I don't even know for sure how long I've been in here myself," so she shrugged again. "I noticed when the monster guy opened the jar and saw you get pulled in. You demorphed almost as soon as you hit the ground and I had to roll you over so you wouldn't drown in whatever that is. Kimberly shifted uneasily, her boots and dress were liberally soaked with the maybe water they were standing in from her time kneeling at his side. Harry once more looked around. Upon seeing only the gourd-like walls around their relatively circular prison, he looked upward to see what looked like a cork wedged into the center of the domed ceiling around 15 to 20 feet above them. Coming back to himself, he noticed that he too was soaked through and idly waved his hand, casting cleaning and drying charms on the both of them. Although their respective footwear was immediately soaked again, Kimberly still gave him a smile in thanks. It's kinda weird though, the Pink Ranger continued. This water I mean. It was definitely higher before you showed up, like up past my waist higher, and then it dropped again when the monster opened the jar. Harry quirked an eyebrow before thoughts connected and he sighed. That makes a depressing amount of sense. According to Zordon, the monster is known as the Samurai Fan Man. We are currently trapped in a pocket dimension in his jar that will vanish after 3 hours of existence, taking anything within along with it. Zordon also said that if the jar is used to trap something else, the 3-hour time limit resets. My guess is that the rising water is something of a timer. Kimberly seemed to pale in the dim light that suffused the inside of the jar. 3 hours? Harry nodded grimly. Yeah, but I'm sure the others will get us out of here before then. Tommy was rather annoyed when you were captured. Harry smirked at Kimberly with a teasing glint in his eye and chuckled when her face lit up in a blush. So, he continued speaking before she could mount a comeback. Have you tried morphing or anything to get out of here? Kimberly glared at Harry briefly before answering. Yeah, but no such luck. I got a few sparks, but no spandex. Harry hummed quietly before patting his pockets and retrieving his power coin from his back right one. He wasn't complaining, but it was rather odd how his coin always ended up in a pocket when he demorphed. The other Rangers had even reported similar occurrences with their morphers. It was just one of those random quirks of the grid, they had decided. All the same, he might have to look into some kind of a wand holster and see if he could do some negotiating with the grid to have his coin stay in its wand form and end up there. Perhaps with a bit of time he could even get a few enchantments worked into it. Come to think of it, hadn't Death given him a wand holster when the Elder Wand was returned to him in the void? Breaking out of his musings, Harry shifted his coin into its wand form. Well, my power is a bit different from yours. Let's see how I fare, yeah? Kimberly nodded and stepped back slightly as Harry took a dueling stance and gave his wand a flick, lighting up the tip with a mote of golden energy. Acting with speed given by practice, Harry quickly drew his wand through the air, leaving behind the flaming representation of the Deathly Hallows symbol that adorned his ranger suit. Seeing no problem so far, Harry pivoted his stance to stand square with the symbol and flipped his wand around so it rested along his forearm as he crossed his arms overhead at the wrist before jerking them down to his sides as he had done so many times before. Magi Ranger, power up. The fiery symbol in the air before him simply fizzled out. It was one of those moments, Harry reflected, where a rolling tumbleweed drifting across the area would not go amiss as the two Rangers stood silently for several seconds. Well, Harry sighed, standing upright once more and squinting at his golden wand. That didn't work. Kimberly barely held back a snort of laughter, shifting it into a cough rather unconvincingly. After a moment, she spoke up again. Couldn't you just try to blast us out of here without morphing first? I mean, it's not like you don't have other magical powers already, yeah. Harry shot her a mock scowl that she countered with a look of innocence. I was getting to that, Kim. Sheesh, give a guy a break will ya? Kimberly scoffed slightly before smiling at him and waving her hand dismissively. Harry just shook his head and pointed his wand up at the cork. While he could try to just break out the side of the gourd, something told him he would be better off trying to knock out the stopper itself. Nodding to himself at his logic, Harry focused his magic. Reducto. The lance of magic shot out of his wand immediately and Harry was instantly relieved that whatever properties of the jar stopped their morphing didn't also affect his own brand of magic. That relief was instantly shattered when the spell not only failed to have any visible effect on the cork keeping them trapped, but it actually rebounded off of it and straight back at him. SHT. Harry cursed, diving to the side with reflexes gained from his martial arts training while Kimberly tensed up. While Harry rolled through the water and returned to his feet, the spell struck the ground and ricocheted off of it at a slight angle, just enough to hit the far more drastic angle off to one side of the cork back up top, which then sent the bolt of destructive magical energy bouncing around the enclosed space rather randomly. With judicious use of their respective skills and reflexes, and no small amount of seemingly random flips and cartwheels from Kimberly, the two Rangers were able to avoid the spell for several more seconds until Kimberly landed poorly in the water and fell to the ground. Unfortunately, the spell just happened to be heading right for her. Harry saw this as if in slow motion and moved without thinking. With a flick of his wand, Harry conjured a slab of concrete in the air between Kimberly and the blasting curse. At the same time, he dove forward, knocking Kimberly from her sitting position to lie on her back, and used his own body to shield her from the shrapnel when the curse blew the concrete into pieces. Okay, so spells were a bad idea. Duly noted. Apparently there was some kind of property to the jar, or perhaps the pocket dimension within the jar, that reflected his magic great. It was then that Harry realized that he was still lying atop Kimberly, face to face with her for several seconds now. Deciding to embrace his more playful, dare he suggest marauder, side that had certainly seen more development since he had arrived in this dimension, Harry shot Kimberly his best charming smile. Well, look what I've caught. You come here often? Kimberly rolled her eyes briefly before smirking and placing a hand onto Harry's cheek. Sorry, purple boy, but I like my men green. Harry fought down a chuckle, twisting his face into an overly dramatic display of sadness. Alas, my love shall remain unrequited in this, my darkest hour. Kimberly giggled briefly before pushing him off of her. Harry just rolled with her shove, moving to lie on his back next to her as the two stared up at the cork in the ceiling. It only took a few moments for the amusement to leave his system, allowing Harry to remember their present situation. You know, Kimberly, Harry started. It occurs to me that we're lying in this strange extra-dimensional liquid and we really don't know what it is or if this is anything approaching a good idea. The two rangers turned their heads to face each other briefly before, as one, they brought their knees up to their chests and kicked out, flipping themselves up and back onto their feet in a synchronized move. Almost at once, Harry waved his wand, once more drying and cleaning them of the probably not water they were standing in that was now noticeably deeper than when Harry had awoken. Kimberly merely stood there as his spell washed over her before giving the Magi Ranger a calculating glance. You're really starting to get good at this, Harry, she stated simply. All that practice with Tommy is starting to pay off. Harry scoffed slightly as he tucked his wand into his pocket. Maybe for things like standing up, Kim, but it was my own overconfidence after all that practice that got me trapped in here. I was doing so well against the putties that I charged Golder without thinking about it again. Kimberly just smiled. Hey, don't be so HRD on yourself. We all have trouble fighting Golder from time to time. And besides, you can't expect to match the level of style and skill that some of us have after only a few months of practice. She idly flicked her hair back before buffing her nails on her dress, shooting him a teasing smirk at the same time. Harry just grinned and shook his head. It was kind of amusing, he decided, that the two were reverting to teasing and humor in response to their rather stressful situation. It seemed to be a default response for the other Rangers, save perhaps Jason, when faced with difficulties, but it was certainly not something Harry himself was used to. Though he seemed to have adopted this coping tactic himself after spending so much time around them. As for Kimberly in particular, Harry realized that he didn't really know too much about her. They hadn't really spent a great deal of time with each other outside of Ranger activities, Harry tending to hang out with Zach and Tommy while Kimberly spent time with Trini and studiously avoided anything that may cue Tommy in on her attraction to him. Harry also found it amusing that Kimberly seemed just as unaware of Tommy's attraction to her as he was to her attraction to him. In fact, speaking of Tommy, why haven't you two started dating yet? Kimberly's sputtering and choking fit nearly sent Harry into a fit of laughter. When she finally regained herself, she glared at him. What makes you think I'm even interested in Tommy? Harry just gave her a blank look before slowly raising one eyebrow. Really? How about when you first saw him at the karate tournament before Rita hypnotized him? You could barely keep your eyes off of him long enough to hold a conversation with anyone else. Once we identified him as the Green Ranger, you were almost constantly worried about him. And ever since he joined the team you keep shooting him these looks anytime you think nobody is watching. Kimberly intensified her glare, prompting Harry to laugh. No, not that look. The one with the big, longing eyes and the pouty face. Her narrowing eyes and clenched fists only intensified his laughter. After a few seconds, her face shifted into a crafty smirk. Well, what about you, Harry? Why haven't you started dating anyone? Surely there's someone you're interested in around Angel Grove by now. Harry sobered almost instantly. No, not particularly. Kimberly, sensing weakness, took a half step closer. Come on, Harry. There has to be someone you've got your eye on. Harry just sighed. He probably deserved this for picking on the Pink Ranger's own relationship status. Alright, Kim, hang on a moment. Let me explain something to you, alright? Do you recall back when I told you guys about my dimension and my life growing up? Kimberly nodded briefly, suddenly realizing that the teasing conversation had taken a slightly more serious turn based on Harry's tone. Do you remember Zach asking me about any previous girlfriends? Kimberly thought for a moment, her brow scrunching up in concentration, before nodding. I think so. You mentioned your fame being an issue and the war of course and other complications I think? Harry nodded. Yeah, I could never really be certain if a girl wanted to be with Harry or with Harry Potter, the boy who lived. When you added that in with the perceived fortune that my family was rumored to have, I had to be extra careful about getting involved in any relationships. Though admittedly the fame situation isn't much of an issue here. Kimberly blinked. Did your family have a fortune? Harry rolled his eyes. Yes, but that's not really the point. What with the war going on, and even before that when I was just periodically facing different incarnations of Voldemort, I couldn't really devote much attention to a relationship either. And that's not even mentioning the target that any girlfriend of mine would have had painted on her back. But that was back then. What about now? Harry sighed again and moved to lean against one of the walls. Now I'm faced with a whole other set of problems, Kimberly. Not only am I involved in this war against Rita, but I really don't have anything to offer anyone in a relationship. I barely make enough money to feed myself, and with the constant threat of having to run off and fight against a monster, I don't feel like I could be a very good boyfriend right now. Harry suddenly gave a self-depreciating snort of laughter. And besides all that, I'm not at all afraid to admit that I'm emotionally stunted. Between my less than loving upbringing with my relatives and almost immediately being thrown into the deep end of magical conflict just as I reached the age that I might have started thinking about dating, I don't think I'd have even the slightest clue what to do in a relationship. Kimberly moved to stand next to him and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Hey, don't go being so pessimistic, Harry. You just have to find a girl who will help you with learning all that. Everyone has to learn it at first anyway, so you're not really special in that. Harry smiled weakly before shaking himself. It doesn't matter anyway, Kimberly. Like I said, with the battles against Rita and my current situation otherwise, I just can't justify trying to get involved with anyone anytime soon. When Kimberly opened her mouth to protest once more, both Rangers were knocked off their feet when their entire world seemed to start shaking. Harry found himself completely unable to regain his feet, and things only got worse when the gourd around them seemed to expand massively, going from perhaps 10 or 15 feet across to well over 100 in a matter of seconds. On top of that, the liquid that had before been close to 3 or 4 inches deep was suddenly deep enough to completely submerge them, resulting in both Rangers coughing and spitting after their sudden dip. What the dash, Harry sputtered before slipping back beneath the temporarily surging surface of the maybe water. Harry spat, both completing his thought and expressing his displeasure at getting dunked again. Something about the consistency of the liquid convinced him more and more that it wasn't water. It just didn't seem to have the same weight he usually associated with water, a fact that made it a bit harder to swim in. Spinning around as he kicked frantically, Harry spotted Kimberly more than 20 feet away and swam as best he could to reach her. The Pink Ranger was a far superior swimmer to Harry, and so it was her that had covered the majority of the space between them when they finally met up. I think, Kimberly said, barely able to keep her own head above the surface. I think Rita may have grown the fan man. Harry resisted the urge to respond with sarcasm. Kimberly didn't deserve to have his irritation taken out on her. Yeah, most likely, though I wouldn't have thought that anything like this would have happened. Kimberly appeared to nod, though it was rather hard to tell with all the bobbing she was doing while she swam. No kidding, I don't suppose you could magic up anything to help us, could you? Like a boat or something? Harry thought for a moment before nodding hesitantly. Maybe hang on. Drawing his wand again, Harry conjured up a large slab of wood underneath them before hitting it with a quick series of charms to increase its buoyancy and keep it balanced no matter where they stood. Almost immediately, the makeshift raft floated up under them and lifted the 2 Rangers free of the liquid that Harry then once more removed from their soaked clothing. Once the two had steadied themselves once again, Kimberly turned to face him. So, where were we? Harry raised a finger and cut her off. Can we not keep talking about my non-existent love life, please? How about if we drop this subject? I won't bring up you and Tommy anymore, deal? Kimberly looked conflicted, but she finally nodded. All right, Harry. I'll drop it for now, but you really shouldn't completely cut yourself off. For all you know, there could be a perfect girl just waiting for you to look at her and notice it. Harry hummed non-committally, but refrained from any actual comment, though in his mind he rebelled against the thought. No matter what Kimberly might say, Harry knew that he couldn't inflict a relationship on anyone as long as he was engaged in this latest secret war. And so the two sat there for several more minutes in silence. Finally, Kimberly spoke again. You know, I kind of find this reassuring. Harry quirked an eyebrow. What do you mean? Kimberly just waved her hands, gesturing to the space around them. I mean the fact that Rita grew her monster. That means that the others are fighting against it and probably have their Zords out by now. If the fan man had just retreated back to Rita's moon base after capturing us, the others might not have been able to get to us in time. As long as we have this proof that the fight is still going on, I won't lose hope. Harry blinked before nodding, smiling at her and stopping himself before he once more brought up how upset Tommy had been at her capture and how that would make him fight harder than usual. It was a struggle, but he remembered the deal he had only just made with Kimberly and really didn't want her to keep commenting on his own relationship status. Instead, he voiced another thought. Personally, I'm just glad that we aren't experiencing any real turbulence in here. Other than the shifting when the jar grew, things have been rather calm. I really don't fancy trying to swim in all this if we were feeling all the movement that normally comes with a Zord battle. Kimberly seemed to pale before nodding frantically. Oh yeah, I see what you mean. Ironically enough, the jar chose that moment to shift violently to one side, sending the two rangers and their makeshift raft tumbling once more into the waves below them despite Harry's charms. Me and my big mouth. Harry commented as he latched onto the wood, doing what he could to maintain his grip and keep himself above the surface despite the frothy waves around him. He was more than a little thrilled that he had maintained his grip on his wand through his most recent tumble, though he once more reaffirmed his intent to see about creating a wand holster. Kimberly managed to grab onto the opposite side of the raft and merely glared at him silently. And then they heard something. It was only the slightest of grinding noises, but it drew their attention upwards to the cork. The cork that was shifting slightly as it rose up and away from them. Hey, Harry said slowly. It is just me, or is the cork getting pulled out? Before his companion could respond, the cork was indeed pulled free from the jar and the two rangers held their breath to see what was going to happen next. Idle fears of one of the Zords getting sucked into the jar and crushing them were almost immediately swept aside as Harry and Kimberly found themselves swept up into a vortex of yellow energy that lifted them up and out of their prison. Only for them to immediately begin falling from a height of nearly 6 stories. Harry glanced around quickly and took in the sight of the Dragon Zord, battle mode, tossing aside the jar and cork before turning to face off against the giant fan man while the Tyrannosaurus Dinozord battled with Golder. They were in one of the many flat, rocky areas outside of Angel Grove and the ground was pitted with craters and the like from various explosions. Exchanging a glance with Kimberly, who was falling next to him while wrestling with her morpher, Harry nodded and whipped his wand around in front of him, immediately drawing a flaming symbol of the Death Hallows. Magi Ranger, power up. Pterodactyl. As soon as their suits formed around them, Harry immediately released a burst of power. Hedwig. A mere 20 feet from the ground and what would have been a very painful landing even with their suits, both rangers found themselves snatched out of the air by Hedwig's talons. Harry/Wizard, why were you trying to fly without a broom? Harry rolled his eyes. It wasn't by choice, Hedwig. Hedwig merely let out a short bark and sent him a feeling of amusement as she flapped hard to gain altitude. Once she had and turned back toward the battle, she tucked her wings in tight to her sides and spun, releasing the two rangers above her only for them to land solidly on her back when she righted herself and spread her wings again. Whoa! Kimberly shouted, crouching low against the wind. That was intense. Harry smiled beneath his helmet. Yeah, Hedwig has always been a good flyer, though I've never had the pleasure of flying with her like this before. Waving her forward, Harry led Kimberly up to stand on Hedwig's head, allowing the Zord to bleed off her momentum and start hovering in a vertical position while the three looked upon the fight before them. The two respective battles were going similarly, just not for the same side. Between the Tyrannosaurus and Golder, the Simian sword and the extra reach it gave him was a distinct advantage that was made apparent by the numerous scorch marks dotting the Zord's hull. Yet between the Fan Man and the Dragon Zord, battle mode, the Zord's drill-tipped spear was a clearly superior weapon to the Fan Man's rake. Really? Harry nearly facepalmed before refocusing on the battle. Alright, the rake that the Fan Man was using to try and combat. The spear wielded by the Zord was proving to be less than effective. Well, Kimberly said, stepping forward slightly. Looks like it's time we got involved here, eh Harry? Harry nodded, summoning up the Magi staff and spinning it to gather power. I agree, Kimberly. Let's show these guys why you don't mess with the Power Rangers. Kimberly raised one hand to the mouthpiece on her helmet, almost as if suppressing a giggle. Harry, that almost sounded cheesy. Harry scoffed. I blame the grid power I'm gathering right now. It does things to you. Without commenting again, Kimberly turned back to face forward before throwing her right hand into the air. I need Dinozord power, now. Kimberly then leapt straight up into the air and was met seconds later by the STRKNG form of her pterodactyl Dinozord that then made an attack run, flying over the battle while firing lances of energy into the Fan Man and Golder. Alright, Kimberly. Jason's voice echoed across Harry's communicator. Nice to have you back. Harry, are you joining the party too? Harry smiled as he finished channeling power into his now glowing staff. I'll be there momentarily, Jason. With a grunt, Harry brought his staff down onto the dome atop Hedwig's head and released the power in a burst as they fused once more. In the week and a half since he and Hedwig had first done this, Zordon had advised Harry to spend more time with his familiar. In particular, he instructed Harry and Hedwig to meditate together and work on combining their energies to allow for a more fluid fusion in the future. It would help prevent the dual identity feeling that they had both reported during the fight with Mutatus, which would only make them even more successful in future battles. And it was only due to this practice, which they tended to do each night before Harry fell asleep on his cot, that Harry still felt mostly himself when awareness returned to him and he found himself looking out Hedwig's eyes. "All right, Hedwig," Harry said, once more hearing his voice echoing around the battleground for all to hear. "Let's take the fight to them." Of course, Harry/Wizard. And with that said, Harry felt Hedwig trigger the same transformation sequence as before. He felt as his wings swept up and back, making room for a pair of more familiar arms to fold out of his chest. He felt the avian head fold down to reveal the humanoid head beneath even as his legs stretched out to double their length. Finally, after a few more seconds and several clanks and grinding noises as his currently mechanical form settled, Harry allowed himself to move again, taking a fighting stance as he called out in a dual voice of both his own mixed with Hedwig's mental one. "Silver Owl Zord, warrior mode." It had been rather uncomfortable and more than a bit disorienting going through the transformation sequence this time. He supposed that was because of his greater feeling of self and his awareness of the sensations this time around. Still, he felt Hedwig's comforting mental presence just behind his own, waiting to step in and help if necessary even as he started walking toward Golder and the Tyrannosaurus. "Jason," Harry called out, somehow feeling that he was transmitting through their communicators as opposed to out loud. "Hedwig and I will hold off Golder. You and the others should focus on the fan man for now. He's the bigger threat." There was no response for a second and Harry was a bit worried that Jason would react badly to him giving advice that was rather close to battle orders when Jason was the leader of the team. But after a tense few moments, Jason responded. "All right, Harry, good luck. We'll back you up as soon as we take care of the fan man." And the Tyrannosaurus dinosaur disengaged from Golder, turning away to stomp over to where the other rangers were battling the fan man in the Dragonzord battle mode. "So, Maggling," Golder drawled, brandishing his sword as he began slowly walking to the side, a movement that Harry copied so that the two gargantuans were circling each other. "You and your pet bird think that you can take me now when my power is augmented by my Empress?" Harry gave a mental smirk, one he felt Hedwig copying. "Must we go through this pointless taunting every time we fight Golder? I understand that you have to psych yourself up before we get going, but it's getting really old by now." Golder sneered. "So be it, Maggling. I shall enjoy plucking you both." With that, Golder charged, swinging his sword toward Harry's head. It seemed, however, that Harry was much faster in this form than Golder was. With an almost negligent move, Harry ducked, letting the blade pass over his head, before standing once more and using the slight bit of extra momentum from his legs to drive his right fist into Golder's armored stomach, this time with much better results. "Not so fun when I'm the one with the upper hand, is it, Golder?" The armored simian growled as he stumbled backwards, his free hand clutching over his stomach as Harry watched him idly. "But why should we stop there?" Harry asked, as he reached behind his back with both arms and underneath the feathery cloak that had once been Hedwig's wings. With a slight JRK, his two arms came back around him holding a pair of large feathers that were each nearly as long as his arms. Grasping them firmly at the base, Harry flipped the one in his left hand around into a reverse grip and took a fighting stance. "Feather sabers." Before Golder could react, the two feathers flashed brightly as their forms changed into a pair of wide blades with D-guard handles and feathered designs going all down their length. "Don't think that a few weapons will scare me," Golder roared, his confident visage shifting into rage. "I am more than skilled enough with a blade to defeat you no matter what form you take." Harry and Hedwig exchanged a mental smirk again before Harry charged forward, holding his blades at the ready. In point of fact, Harry still had absolutely no training with a sword, let alone using two at once, but this particular aspect of the fusion between himself and Hedwig was controlled almost exclusively by his familiar, who seemed to have it programmed into her robot body. So it was with a casual sweep of his left blade that Harry deflected Golder's first attack and followed up with a strike across his chest with the right one, sending Golder back in a shower of sparks. "You see, Golder," Harry taunted. "The problem here is that you haven't quite grasped the advantages I have now." Harry moved fluidly to one side as Golder staggered back to his feet and lunged forward with his sword, leaving an opening for Harry to smash the pommel of one blade into the back of Golder's head in a suitably ironic counterattack. As the monster shook off the blow and climbed to his feet once more, Harry continued. You are a powerful fighter, it's true, but you're all power. Golder spun to face him before stepping close again, swinging with his sword in an overhand slice that was blocked by an upraised arm and Harry's reversed sword. When Golder increased the pressure on Harry's blocking blade and tried to punch him with his free hand, Harry slipped to the side, letting Golder stumble past where he had just been standing and letting Harry spin around and lash out once more with his right blade, striking Golder across his back. And while you are all power, in this form Hedwig and I are speed and finesse, so as long as we keep you off balance you don't stand a chance. Harry stepped up again, his swords flashing out repeatedly, leaving behind a latticework of scorch marks and sparks. I'll admit that I was overconfident earlier today. Harry ducked underneath a desperate backhanded slash before bringing his own blade across Golder's wrist, forcing him to drop his weapon. But as I am now, fused with my familiar and fighting together as one, you can't hope to touch us, so a bit of overconfidence can be forgiven. Harry backed away several steps and flipped his reversed sword back into a proper grip while Golder panted and growled at him. As the monster watched, the dome housing the resurrection stone that now sat in the center of the warrior mode Zord's chest began glowing. Goodbye Golder. In the blink of an eye, the glow from the orb spread to the two blades, emphasizing the feather patterns on each of them as Harry lifted both blades overhead. Silver Owl Zord, Twin Blade Buster. With a completely unnecessary grunt of effort, Harry swung both blades down, impacting the ground and releasing the energy held within in a stream of destruction that raced along the ground toward Golder. However, before the attack reached him, Golder was engulfed in a bright red aura and vanished mere moments before the attack exploded. We will fight again another day, Magling, I promise you that. Harry sighed internally as he rose from the crouch his attack had kept him frozen in. Stupid grid and its need for dramatics. If it weren't for all the posturing he had to do he might have been able to finish Golder off. Throughout the battle, Harry had subconsciously noted the radio chatter of the other Rangers as they battled the Fan Man, but it was only now that he really paid attention to it. I call upon the power of Titanus and the Ultrazord. Harry blinked, actually feeling the metal eyelids of his Zord move when he did so. He knew that Titanus was a Zord of incredible power, but to his knowledge, the Rangers hadn't called on him so far. This should be interesting. The ground started to rumble several moments before the long white neck and head of Titanus came into sight. The Zord moved on treads like a tank. Although it had legs similar to those of the Brontosaurus it was modeled after, they appeared to be nothing more than ornamental. Its body was wide, but was generally featureless as compared to the other Zords Harry was more familiar with. The Fan Man, now wielding the same war fan it had used on the Rangers just before Harry was captured, seemed rather taken aback. It was stumbling back as if in fear, holding its fan in one hand and waving the other as if in a panic. Then Harry heard Jason's voice once again. Alright guys, prepare for Ultrazord transformation sequence. As Harry watched, idly noting that his blades had changed back into feathers as he tucked them back into his wings/cloak, Titanus began changing form. It was a relatively simple change all things considered. The back of the Zord opened up and the neck shifted forward and down, lowering it in comparison to the rest of the body. And just when Harry thought it was done, two massive cannons rose up from the body to rest on either side of the neck. Harry smirked. Now in the regular Megazord, the Rangers made their Zord jump into the air, spinning as it did and landing squarely in the now empty recession in Titanus's back. Meanwhile, the Dragon Zord split in half vertically from the forehead down while its feet tucked themselves up behind the large knee plates. The resulting construct settled itself onto the Megazord's head and shoulders with a loud clank signaling it locking into place. By now the Fan Man was nearly falling over itself trying to back away. Harry was just confused as to why it hadn't tried attacking during the transformation sequence or why it didn't turn around and run. After a few moments, he just labeled it as another one of those morphing grid things and continued to wait for the fireworks. He didn't have to wait long. Lock on and fire all weapons. Almost immediately the two cannons on either side of Titanus, or rather the Ultrazord, lit up with internal light and let loose a pair of energy blasts that slammed into the Samurai Fan Man and staggered him backwards. The monster was then peppered with multiple blasts coming from the Dragonzord portion as nearly every prominent part of it, from the tucked-in hands to the knee plates resting on either side of the Megazord's shoulders, began firing energy attacks of their own that bombarded the Fan Man relentlessly. Finally, the monster dropped to a knee as its own defenses failed under the sheer number of attacks. It only had time for one last cry of despair and anger before it fell fully to the ground and exploded. Hearing the cheers of his fellow Rangers, Harry just smiled. The Ultrazord relied on a massive number of attacks to overwhelm its opponents and wear them down as opposed to a single more powerful attack as with the other Zord combinations, but it was no less effective. Alright, Rangers. Let's head back to the command center. Jason called, good cheer in his voice from another Power Ranger victory. I'll meet you guys there. Harry responded as Hedwig triggered their transformation to change back to her owl form. It was no less off-putting than the previous change had been. Zordon's debriefing of the Rangers and their viewing of the battle's replay in the viewing globe took a bit less than an hour. As soon as the formalities were over, Trini all but bolted over and wrapped Kimberly in what looked like a very tight hug. I'm glad you're all right, she mumbled into Kimberly's shoulder before releasing her and turning toward Harry. Before the Magi Ranger could react, he found himself in the same position as Kimberly had been. Harry froze momentarily, his eyes widening at the unexpected contact until he noticed Kimberly giving him a significant look, nodding toward Trini. Harry just raised an eyebrow in confusion before returning Trini's hug, albeit not quite as tight. The hug lasted a bit longer than Kimberly's, not that Harry was really counting, and as soon as Trini stepped back, the slightest hint of a blush on her face, Zach started in on them. So what happened to you guys in that jar? Harry and Kimberly shared a glance before she gestured for him to speak. He sucked a breath through his teeth before doing so. You know, just your average dimensional prison, water on the floor, creepy fog, walls that reflected spells, the usual. Tommy snorted. So just an average day in the life of a Power Ranger, yep. Harry chuckled as he nodded. Pretty much. After spending a portion of his afternoon trapped in a jar, though with not unpleasant company, Harry had a strong longing to feel the sun on his skin for a while. So of course he let Kimberly and Trini drag him to the completely indoor mall to in theory look into the magic shop Kimberly had mentioned. It seemed however that there was at least one rule that remained true no matter what dimension he was in: girls were scary, especially when it came time for shopping. It actually took them a full 2 hours to get around to the magic shop from when they entered. The sad thing was that Harry had spotted the place almost immediately upon entering the building, but Kimberly and Trini had literally dragged him in the opposite direction to where Kimberly knew of a sale that she just had to check out. And so it was. After 2 hours of trudging through the mall and carrying an ever-increasing load of bags and being asked his opinion on how certain outfits looked far more than he was comfortable with, Harry was finally able to take a look around the magic shop, only to be almost immediately disappointed. He wasn't really sure what he had expected, but a 10 by 10 shop with a few simple magic books, decks of playing cards marked and unmarked, and other small tricks wasn't really it. The older man working behind the counter was very helpful, probably because there weren't many customers on an average day, but in the end Harry left with a few recommended books, a couple decks of playing cards unmarked, thank you, and the man's well wishes ringing in his ear. It wasn't quite the start that he had imagined, but Harry knew he had achieved more with less in the past. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 9. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and 10-star 12 on FANFICTION.net. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.